Is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
An incredibly busy show for you this Friday evening. Should we return the priceless Elgin marbles to the Greek government? I'll debate that with former government minister and Strictly star Anne Widdecombe in The Clash. Then we'll head to Austria and speak to a protest organiser about plans to make the COVID vaccine mandated by law. Early next year, that's right, the vaccine by law. In Mark Meets, we'll have the incredible real-life story of Joe Smith, Romany gypsy turned sporting superstar. Via crime and bare-knuckle fighting, Joe tells his incredible story at 10. You won't want to miss it. My fabulous panel of radio legend Mike Parry, sensational author and dating expert Nikki Hodgson, and revered political journalist Benedict Spence will be here all night reacting to the stories in my news agenda. And in my monologue, I'll be dealing with exploding childhood obesity. And at 10, I'll be making my first live on-air comments in a personal capacity only about Andrew Neil and his controversial departure from GB News. That's right, I'll be talking about Andrew Neil and the rather messy divorce at 10 o'clock. You won't want to miss it. Now, I can't wait to have your company. We're going to have some fun tonight, but first up, here are the news headlines with Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Mark. These are your latest headlines. Counter-terrorism police have confirmed that the bomb, which exploded outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital on Sunday, had been packed with ball bearings. They say it could have caused significant injury or death had it exploded in the way the bomber intended. Detectives are examining the possibility that the motion of the taxi stopping suddenly may have caused the improvised device to detonate prematurely. Double child killer Colin Pitchfork has been arrested and recalled to prison just 2 months after his release. It's understood Pitchfork was returned to custody earlier today over a breach of his licence conditions. His re-release will be a matter for the parole board. Pitchfork was jailed for life after raping and strangling 15-year-olds Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth in Leicestershire in 1983 and 1986. US teenager Kyle Rittenhouse has been found not guilty of all charges following a shooting in Wisconsin in a trial which has divided America. Mr. Rittenhouse killed 2 white men and injured another when he opened fire during protests that rocked the town of Kenosha last year. In the last hour, the 18-year-old collapsed in court as he was acquitted of all charges after pleading self-defense in the shootings that became a flashpoint in the nation's debate over guns and vigilantism. The jury came back with its verdict after nearly 3.5 days of deliberation. The UK is seeking to ban the group Hamas, designating it a terrorist organisation. The move, if approved by Parliament, would bring British policy in line with the EU and the US. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says Hamas has significant terrorist capability. That includes access to extensive and sophisticated weaponry and terrorist training facilities. Supporters of the Palestinian Islamist group could face up to 10 years in prison. A Hamas official has described the decision as biased towards Israel. COVID booster jabs have been added to the travel pass. Millions of people who've had 3 doses can now prove their status with the NHS app. It means people can visit countries where vaccinations are only valid for a certain amount of time without having to quarantine. Austria will enter a full national lockdown for at least 10 days from Monday. Unvaccinated citizens were told to stay at home last month, but Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg says nationwide restrictions are now needed to try to contain a 4th wave of COVID cases. You are right up to date. Now, back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Many thanks, Karen. It's Friday, November the 19th, and we've got a fantastic show lined up for you. In the clash, should we return the priceless Elgin marbles to the Greek government? I'll debate that with an Oxford professor who says yes, and former government minister and Strictly star Anne Widdecombe, who says a very firm no. With Austria set to make the COVID vaccine mandatory by law early next year, we'll go live to Austria and speak to a protest organiser at the heart of the story. My Mark Meets guest tonight is an extraordinary man who went from Romany gypsy living in a caravan for the first 10 years of his life via crime and bare-knuckle fighting to golfing superstardom. Joe Smith has written a book about his incredible life and he's live at 10. In Frequently Asked Questions, should we worry about the national debt? We'll speak to Dr. Eamon Butler from the renowned economic think tank, the Adam Smith Institute. And in Uncensored at 11, we'll talk to top US commentator Carol Roth about the crisis of American capitalism and how the pandemic was used, so she says, to destroy small businesses. Reacting to the big stories of the day and looking at tomorrow's newspaper front pages is my amazing panel tonight. The smartest journalist on Fleet Street, Benedict Spence. Sensational author and professional dating expert, Nikki Hodgson. And radio legend, Mike Parry. Could call him Porky, but he's looking a bit thin these days. In my monologue in just a moment's time, I'll be dealing with the issue of childhood health. We're letting our kids down. And after 10, strap yourselves in, folks. My first comments live on air about Andrew Neil and his controversial departure from GBNews. Those are my first public comments. They're exclusively my view, and you'll want to hear them at 10 o'clock. But my priority for the next 3 hours is to get your views on the national television airwaves. So email me now, mark@gbnews.uk, and throughout the show. As you know, hearing from you is my favourite part of the programme. So strap yourselves in. A big Friday night is in store. We seek to entertain, stimulate and inform in equal measure. It is Friday, so grab something cold from the fridge, fire up the kettle, tear open the Viennese whirls, and let's get to work. Time for my big opinion. A statistic that may have escaped your attention is one of the worst I've seen in the last 18 months, and it's got some competition, hasn't it? The statistic isn't about COVID cases, it's not about inflation, unemployment, or even the shocking rise in the cost of living, which I'm going to make a big priority of this show going forward. It's a statistic about our kids. A quarter of 11-year-old children are now obese. A quarter. As well as 1 in 7 4- and 5-year-olds starting school. Another lockdown legacy Well done, everyone. Now, we're not talking overweight. This isn't puppy fat. It's not, he's a bit of a chubster, he'll grow out of it. Obese. Our expanding national waistline is the real pandemic. There have been no vaccines developed for it, of course, no lockdowns to control it. In large part, we've been exposed to the worst of COVID because of this ignored problem. Imagine just for a moment if we'd borrowed £500 billion to get everyone back in shape, to get that pesky body mass index down, and to get us all fighting fit. It would have been money well spent. Notwithstanding old age, COVID is largely a lifestyle-related disease. No one overweight, no pandemic. But I'm a liberal. I believe in freedom. You are entitled to eat what you want to eat, drink what you want to drink, ride a motorbike, go skiing, do anything that may not be good for you, watch Newsnight if you have to. My world is a free world. We can't have more state measures to control obesity. We've had more than a lifetime's worth of state intervention over the last 2 years. It's quite enough. Lockdowns for the biggest waistline, passports that stop you going into nightclubs, a mask mandate to cover your face so you don't demolish a KFC. Now, this would have sounded far-fetched a couple of years ago, but at the moment, it's a distinct possibility. We all know that we need to eat more healthily. And I think what the public would appreciate, this is just my guess, is some support if they want to be healthier and some information. But crucially, information and not instruction. I repeat, information, not instruction. And let me tell you that I was rocking the dad bod. I lost 3 stone in 2018 by cutting carbohydrates. Things like bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, sugar and beer. I know, all of the delicious stuff. It's a method extolled by the likes of TV doctor and best-selling health author Dr. Michael Mosley, NHS cardiologist Aseem Malhotra, and Dr. David Unwin, the Mail on Sunday GP, another low-carb doctor who is turning his patients skinny and reversing their type 2 diabetes. But it's information, not instruction. What's not acceptable, and something about which I am not liberal at all, is allowing children to become obese. It's not acceptable. We're letting them down. With this shocking statistic about their health, and that's what it's about, it is about health, we are badly letting down our young of this country. Children's weight has exploded during lockdown because they were prevented from going to playgrounds, banned from having a kickabout on a football pitch, and unable to meet their friends for a game of it. And of course, with schools closed for months on end, it's been bad for their mental health, and perhaps understandably, they've turned to the cookies. The children are our responsibility. They are our most precious resource. They are our future. Right now, it's a quarter of kids that are obese at the age of 11. A quarter, can you believe that? But eventually, if we carry on like this, it will be half of them, then 3/4 and beyond. We owe it to them, and it's in our interests to get great food into our little people, at home, at school, and out and about. It is, of course, the processed food industry who are responsible for this nightmare. Huge multi-billion-dollar food companies are filling our children with appalling crap, and our kids are paying the price. But we can protect them. The buck stops with us because we don't have to spend our bucks on that rubbish. Endless takeaways, ice creams, sweets, biscuits, crisps. An occasional treat like you had when you were little, no problem. But eating badly has become the norm. It's not a special treat anymore, and our kids deserve better. Given that children face such a low risk from the virus, it's a cruel irony that they have paid the highest price in this pandemic. Mental health issues, physical health problems, social isolation, a damaged education, and when they're older, they'll be the ones picking up the £500 billion national debt bill for this lockdown experiment. We love our kids, I know we do. But so many of the policies that we've seen over the last 2 years, like needlessly masking children as young as 12 in the classroom all day long, separating them from their friends and stopping them doing sports, and even vaccinating them against the advice of the vaccine's body, the JCVI, it feels like we hate kids. We have to show that the opposite is the case. This is about priorities, especially as we emerge from the pandemic. Children are not collateral damage. They're not vectors of disease. They're not human shields. They are children, and they're there to be protected. They're not there to protect us. I can't put it any more bluntly than this. Children are more important than adults by some distance, and yet they've come last throughout this pandemic. So it's time now to reverse that and put our kids first. So excited about tonight's show. I will be making my first public on-air comments about Andrew Neil's departure from GB News at 10 o'clock. You won't want to miss it. But with me now and throughout the show is my amazing panel. I am buzzing, folks. Writer and commentator Benedict Spence, journalist, author and dating expert Nikki Hodgson, and legendary broadcaster and Fleet Street icon Mike Parry. Great to have all three of you with us. Nikki, can we talk about this childhood obesity? Have I overreacted?
No, I don't think you have actually, Mark. It's really interesting because when I was a teenager, I actually had an eating disorder. I was anorexic. So you could say that I had the opposite problem. But in that particular context, what it was really about was that I was having emotional problems and I didn't really know how to express myself. And as a result, it kind of got channeled into my relationship with food. And obviously, during the pandemic with children, they also have struggled emotionally. And, you know, food has been a great comfort and it's been one of the easiest things. We've all done it. We've all eaten too much during the pandemic. So I think everything you say is right. And I think it is time to start to break that pattern of emotional eating because we don't need to comfort eat anymore. And it's not good for us. We need to learn how to get our emotions met and our needs met in other ways and not through eating.
Benedict Spence, information, not instruction.
Yes, I think that's a pretty good line to be going with. I do think that it's one of the rather interesting things, isn't it, about our society, is that we tend to be one that's very happy when it comes to diagnosing problems after the fact, but not very keen on actually solving them sort of at the root cause. It's one area where I think we do need to be addressing more, certainly when it comes to things like education, when it comes to schools, but we do need to recognise actually that there are an awful lot of parents who don't necessarily have the time and the resources or the skills, ultimately, to be providing for their children. You know, that might just be because of the relationship that they have with work. They don't have the time, you know, they have a long period of commuting or whatever, or it might just be that they were never taught to sort of cook properly themselves. And it is something that we don't do particularly well in this country, and we do need to address. You know, I'm as guilty as anybody else. I mean, I'm right here, I'm drinking a cup of coffee at whatever time because I'm very tired at the end of the day. But, you know, you can imagine how it is if you've got young children, how difficult it can sometimes be to feed them properly. And, you know, you understand why it is. You know, some people just sort of bung them a bit of an easy bit of junk food. But it is something fundamentally that we do need to address. Because as you say in your monologue, it is about setting people up to fail throughout their lives. Obesity is a massive underlying cause of all sorts of very serious issues that end up impacting the taxpayer because, of course, it costs the NHS a huge amount of money. So I do think investment in that part of the education system essentially is essential in terms of teaching children, teaching parents, setting them up for healthy habits throughout life in order for them to succeed. Fundamentally, it's about nutrition early on in life.
Mike Parry, obese children were a rarity just 2 or 3 decades ago.
We're 15 minutes into the conversation, and Benedict has only just mentioned the crucial factor here, which we should focus on, and that is parental responsibility, OK? It's all about parents. I don't understand how in this country we can make such a huge issue of food banks where people are queuing up to get, you know, food donated by others, and obese children. How can you have people who are short of food with obese children? And also, Mark, I don't see the obesity in children that you do. Now, where I live, down in Stockbroker Belt, Surrey, I normally get home about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon if I've been working on a breakfast show or something like that, and the kids are coming out of school. I honestly don't see these legions of obese children. I really don't, you know. I don't know where these figures are coming from. It's down to parents feeding their children properly. And how many times do I have to tell people it's cheaper and easier to go to Tesco's and buy salad and tomatoes and lean ham than it is to do the shortcut, which lots of parents do, and take their kids to McDonald's or take their kids to the pizza factory or something like that. It is largely down to parental responsibility. If you're a caring parent, your children should not be fat. and we've got to concentrate on that
But
much
Parry,
more than blaming it on somebody else.
I appreciate your scepticism about the figures. That's why we love having you on the show, because you're a probing journalist that questions everything, and you've made a career out of it. But the bottom line is that you know as well as I do, back in the day, in the 1950s, the 1960s, there was always one fat kid in the class, wasn't there? Now, there's just one thin kid.
No, I don't accept that. As I said to you, I see children walking home from
you're in
school
denial.
every afternoon. I'm sorry?
You're in denial.
No,
You're living in a fool's paradise, Mike Parry.
Well, Mark, I can tell you I'm not in denial. And also, although I'm not a parent myself, I have nieces and nephews. No, I have nieces and nephews, and they've been brought up on proper diets. There's no obesity there. They have caring parents. And it's all about caring parents. You see, I'm amazed, Mark, that you are taking the responsibility for the fitness of our children away from the parents and trying to somehow blame the state. And you're blaming multinational companies for putting food on the shelves of supermarkets. It's up to the parents to buy the right food. It's up to the parents to make sure their kids don't get fat. And you seem to have ignored that in your monologue. And I'm quite surprised, Mark. Quite surprised by you.
Michael, it's not food in the supermarket shelves. It's junk, Benedict Spence.
It's 6 of one and half dozen the other. Look, if you've got a system, ultimately we can... I do think actually what Mike says is important. Ultimately, it comes down to the parents and what it is that they put on the table. But what I think is very important to realise is that systematically, over time, because of the relationship people have with work and the fact that a lot of people have been brought up in environments where they don't do a lot of cooking, where they don't know anything about nutrition.
Excuses, Benedict.
Well, of course...
What have I got a woke panel? Caroline, what's going on?
Sorry.
Benedict?
No, can you not hear me? No, it's not an excuse, it's a reason. Ultimately, you have to look at the underlying reasons for why. And I don't think that it is uncaring parents necessarily. I think that there is a other root cause at the heart of it, and that is that ultimately we have parents who, for whatever reasons, they don't necessarily know very much about dietary requirements. They don't know how to cook lots of different...
They should. They're parents. They should. When you become a parent... When you become a parent, you have to take on the skills of parenthood. And skills of parenthood are to make sure your kid doesn't get fat.
But what
if they haven't? Proper food.
But what if they haven't? What do you say then, Tough? You should just get fat and die? That's not what happens.
You're trying to make out that all parents are thick. All parents aren't thick.
I never said that all parents were thick.
95% of parents are intelligent, sensible people who look after their children and want to look after them, OK? And I still don't get these figures. 1 in 7 youngsters are obese by the time they start primary school now. I don't see it. I'm sorry.
Well, Mike Parry's not having
conclusive evidence.
I'm going to give the last word to hopefully the voice of common sense on this panel. Otherwise, I don't know what we're going to have to do. Take an early bath.
No pressure.
Nikki, is it the food environment? Is it the food companies? Whose fault is it?
Oh my gosh, it's a combination of all these factors. Because the reality is you can feed your children certain food, but then they go to somebody's house, or they go to school, or they go to party, and they get access to the other things, the prohibited things that they're not allowed to eat. It's all what we have to do is teach our children to have a good relationship with food. It's not just about the food you put on the plate, it's how you eat it, it's when you eat, it's why you eat. And those things are more sophisticated.
All right, well, look, I'd love to know what you think. Mark at GBNews.uk. Do you believe those figures about childhood obesity? Mike Parry's not having it. He doesn't see that many kids that are overweight out and about, certainly in Stockboker Belt, Surrey. But what's your experience? Do let me know your thoughts. Is it a problem? Am I overreacting? Mark at GBNews.uk. Email in if you agree, and especially if you don't. We've got a busy show coming up. Austria has become the first Western nation to make COVID vaccines mandatory. That's right, it's the law that you have the jab. That's coming in February. So we'll discuss that one. They're also going back into a national lockdown. We'll speak to an Austrian resident who is not taking the decision lying down. We'll go live to Austria at 10 to 10. My panel will be involved in that one. But in the clash, should we return the priceless Elgin marbles to the Greek government? We'll debate that with none other than former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe. See you in 2.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
I'll get to your opinions very shortly. Mark at gbnews.uk, a really busy show to come. Really excited about my Mark Meets guest at 10. We're going to speak to Joe Smith, a man born a Romani traveller, spent the first 10 years of his life in a caravan, in a loving family setup, but he got involved in crime, in bare-knuckle fighting, and then he became a golf superstar. It's the most incredible life story, and he'll be telling it at 10 o'clock. Also at 10, I'll be making my first live public comments about Andrew Neil's departure from GB News. The purdah is over, and you'll hear my thoughts, unfiltered and unapologetic, at 10, so don't miss that one. But let's crack on with the show. It's time now for The Clash, in which we tackle a major topic of the day from opposing points of view. Now, the Greek Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, has said that he will use every means possible to persuade the United Kingdom to relinquish the Parthenon sculptures and return the so-called Elgin marbles. Now, Mitsotakis has repeatedly described the sculptures as the most important symbolic link between modern Greeks and their ancestors. He used his London visit this week to emphasise the headway made on disputed cultural property. Museums around the world, he said, are increasingly working to share, return, reunite or lend exhibits on an unprecedented scale. This was in a speech to the Science Museum. So where do these priceless items belong? As ever, I want your opinion on this. You're now able to vote on our Twitter poll. So many thanks to the team for setting this one up. Go to GB News on Twitter and let me know your thoughts. I'll get the results very shortly. And of course, your responses on email, mark@gbnews.uk. But to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome former senior government minister, television personality and best-selling author Anne Widdecombe, and also John Tasioulis, who is a professor of ethics and philosophy of law, director of the Institute for Ethics in AI and senior research fellow at Balliol College, Oxford. Professor, if I could start with you, do you think the marbles should return to Greece?
Yes, I do think they should return. I think the basic reason is an ethical reason, not a legal reason. I don't think that there is a strong legal case for saying Britain is under an obligation to return them, but there is a strong moral case for returning them. And that basically rests on two things. One is that the marbles belong to the Parthenon. They're not a self-standing work of art. They belong as part of the Parthenon. And second, that they are integral, and the Parthenon is integral to Greek national identity. So if I could convey what that means for Greeks, it would be something like having half of Stonehenge in a basement, in the basement of a museum somewhere in New York, or having the spire of Durham Cathedral in an American park. This is integral to Greek identity. This is the 200th anniversary of Greek independence. There's a strong and friendly relationship between the two countries, and I think now is the time to return them, not as a matter of legal obligation, but as a matter of generosity and out of greatness of spirit, one country to another.
But John, if the spire of a British cathedral had been rescued from potential ruin, then perhaps in an American park it should stay.
That's a very interesting point, and I think there is an argument to the effect that there should be some gratitude there, if indeed it was the case that the marbles were in effect saved. But think of the analogy. Say I help your child, I save your child from some imminent danger by taking him into my house and sheltering him there. Does that mean that as a reward I get to keep your child? No. When the danger is over, I get to return your child. And I think any issue at the moment of saying the Greeks can't look after these marbles is a non-starter. They now have a magnificent purpose-built museum to house the marbles. They should be returned with good grace. And Britain will receive massive love and affection, not just from the Greeks, but it will also undermine the image that has been unfairly foisted on the British people, that because they voted for Brexit, that they're somehow narrow-minded nationalists. I myself am a supporter of Brexit, and I think that this move, whereby you recognize that, yes, we voted for Brexit, we care about national identity, we care about our own independence, but we should equally care about the identity of other countries.
John, you're an academic that supports Brexit. You should be pickled in formaldehyde and preserved for future historians. And
well, I like to think of myself, Mark.
Well, I know, definitely. Look, it's an interesting thought. Anne, you are a deeply moral person, a practicing Christian, and there is a strong moral case for returning these priceless items.
No, I don't believe that there necessarily is. Historically, an awful lot of things have been transported from one country to another. They've then been taken on by the receiving country. They've become part of that country's own culture and history and fines and all the rest of it. And I feel, therefore, that where something is now is part of the story of that artifact, and it is part of the story of the Elgin marbles that they have come here. However, having said all of that, I can't see why, instead of asking for us simply to return them, we don't have, as I think would be perfectly sensible, a sharing arrangement or loans of the marbles or a rotating of possession. I don't see anything wrong with that. But I don't actually think that, given the time that has elapsed since the Elgin marbles were taken, it's not as if we went over there and did it yesterday. I think it has become part of our story now, and we are part of its story.
And Anne, the contents of the British Museum don't belong to Britain, they belong to the world.
Well, the contents of the British Museum belong to the British Museum, basically, because it is they who will have the final decision about this. This isn't actually, although people think it is, not really a government matter. It's really a matter for the British Museum. But you look at those artefacts in the British Museum, you've got Roman buckles there. Are we supposed to send them back to Italy? I mean, it is just, we have to accept that the transport of goods was part of the historical norm. It's not now, but it was part of the historical norm, part of the story of those particular artefacts. And I don't have a problem with them remaining in Britain, but I do think it would be rather sporting and rather British if we just offered to share a bit.
John Tassioulis, clearly Greece is a wonderful country with a remarkable history, a European ally of ours. However, if we set the precedent of returning the Elgin marbles, I mean, within a short period of time, all of our great museums will be empty, won't they? The pressure to export all sorts of goods from around the world will be upon us, and that does set a dangerous precedent.
And I think the way to avoid that very important argument is to say that this is not a legal case. The case is not that there is a legal obligation, number one. It's a case in morality, and there's a further point. This is not a Roman belt buckle. This is the most integral artifact to Greek national identity. I can't begin to I couldn't possibly exaggerate the importance that it has. And I'm very delighted that Anne is saying that she's open to possibilities like sharing. I think this is precisely what needs to be explored. But unfortunately, what's happening is that UK governments in recent years have given the Greeks a bureaucratic runaround. What they say is, oh, it's nothing to do with the government, it's to do with the trustees of the British Museum. But the trustees themselves are bound by an act of parliament not to get rid of things that are either, unless they are duplicates, or they are not fit to be retained, which doesn't apply in this case. So this is unworthy of a great nation to give a kind of computer says no response. The Prime Minister should engage with his counterpart in Greece to find an accommodation, perhaps along the lines that Anne is describing, but not this bureaucratic, well, we can't do anything about it because an act of parliament that we can change prevents us from doing so.
Anne?
Well, we can do anything we like, obviously. We can give away the entire contents of the British Museum if we want to. We can do all of that. It's ours. We can do it. Or it's the British Museum's and they can do it. And I don't think it's a question of sheltering behind an act of parliament. I think it is looking at the sort of precedent that it would set. OK, it doesn't compare to a Roman buckle, but if it was a particularly priceless Roman buckle that was a huge part of the history of Julius Caesar or something, I can see exactly the same sort of argument.
Mark, can I make one point about that? And that is the point about emptying the museum. The Greek Prime Minister has raised the prospect of giving in exchange some artifacts, priceless artifacts that have not yet been left to leave the country. So it's not as if the marbles would go away and nothing would replace them. There would be a rotating list of wonderful treasures that Britain would get as a mark of Greeks' gratitude for this gesture.
And yes, I think most of the scholarship says that what we've been offered is a rather poor exchange, and that the bits and bobs that we've been offered don't quite amount to the same stature as the Elgin marbles.
I think that's right. I think that the danger you have is that you're swapping a Ferrari for a Ford Cortina. That's always the risk. And Anne, I wonder whether extreme political correctness is going to motivate pressure on the government to actually let these priceless items go. Because, I mean, there are many people on the sort of hard woke left who would love every single museum to be emptied.
I think that there has been pressure from what you describe as political correctness. I think that's undeniable. But in a way, that is very nationalistic. It's saying, what's Greek must stay in Greece, what's British must stay in Britain, what's African must stay in Africa. In a way, that's actually pretty narrow nationalism, even if they dress it up as woke. It's pretty narrow.
I think that's a really fair point. The other concern, John, is that if you return these marbles to Greece, then the Italians will want their Roman coins, the French will want their war swords, the Germans will want their helmets, the Japanese will want their vases. There's no end to it. The problem you've got is that there are lesser regimes who could take possession of some of these artefacts, and they'll either be destroyed or on eBay within minutes.
Well, this is the point that I'm making, that this is an exceptional case to be treated on its merits, not part of a general policy. So I think that's really important. And, the idea that it's somehow a woke notion, I think is a mistake. When the British people have been asked about the return of the marbles, they have tended to say that they would rather have them returned, up to 2-1 in favour of returning them. And the other thing I think I would say is, the cosmopolitan woke elite are those who are most vociferous about retaining the marbles in the British Museum precisely because they don't acknowledge the significance of discrete cultures. They think of cultures as a kind of supermarket situation. And I think that's a mistake. It's a failure to respect the integrity of particular cultures, and especially the Greeks who have suffered so greatly due to the Euro crisis. I think this gesture at this time would just catapult the reputation of Britain throughout the world.
And final thoughts?
I think that last point is just not valid. If I were being ruder, I would say it was a nonsense, but I think it is not remotely valid. The idea that Greece has any less national identity because it doesn't have its Elgin marbles is, I think, stretching a point beyond any reason at all. The fact is, historically, a very long time ago, when archaeologists used to roam the world and bring back their wonderful finds, we had the Elgin marbles, and it's part of their story that they're in Britain.
My thanks to both of you. Now, let me bring you the latest on our Twitter poll. 39.3% of you think we should return the Elgin marbles, while the majority, 60.7%, say that we should not. My thanks to former senior government minister, TV personality, best-selling author Anne Widdecombe, and John Tassioulis, Professor of Ethics and Philosophy of Law, Director of the Institute for Ethics in AI, and Senior Research Fellow at Balliol College in Oxford. Some email feedback on this one. Andrew says, "Hi Mark, great show. I think the marbles should be returned. The argument That British possession is part of the marbles' history is neither here nor there. After all, how do most people feel about our own statues being removed? Put them all back where they truly belong. David says, "Dear Mark, Anne is a politician and regardless of her faith, has the same affliction that most politicians suffer from. The marbles do not belong to the UK, Anne. Let the rightful owners have them back and stop acting like a superior over them." Well, my personal view is that if you think it's sensible to return the Elgin marbles, then you have lost your marbles. Now, after the break, Austria has become the first European country to go back into full lockdown, and it's now the first country to make COVID vaccination compulsory. We'll ask if this is the right decision. We're going to speak to a protest organiser, and my panel, including Mike Parry, will be joining that conversation in 2 minutes' time. And coming up in Mark Meets, I'll be joined by the author of A Romany Life, the incredible true life story of a Romany gypsy turned golf superstar. Joe Smith is live in the studio at 10. Get your questions or comments in, mark@gbnews.uk. You can tweet us at GBNews, and of course that's how you can contact me throughout the show. Don't forget, at 10 o'clock, my first public on-air comments about Andrew Neil's departure from GB News. You won't want to miss that. See you in 2.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Should we return the Elgin marbles to the Greek government? They currently reside in the British Museum. I take the view that the British Museum belongs to the world. You know, London is a global city, Britain is a global country. And I think that people come from all over the world to visit these items, to see them, and that they belong to every citizen of this world, just as I go to the Louvre to visit, you know, certain amazing works of art. They're not all French, but I'm delighted that they're housed within that great institution. But many of you don't agree, actually. Barbara has emailed the programme. Barbara says, Mark, as a matter of principle, we should return anything that does not belong to us, or are we still acting the bully? If countries don't want stuff back, fine. We could try to get items back that were stolen from us to replace them. Nice point and well made. Thank you, Barbara. On obesity, it's been revealed that a quarter of 11-year-olds in this country are now obese. Not overweight, not a bit chubby, actually obese. That was the topic of my monologue, which you can find on Twitter right now at GB News. Our brilliant social media producer, Carl, has crafted that one for you. But David has said, hi, Mark. I was a child during the 60s. The main reason that kids are obese these days is they spend too much of their time in front of the TV and playing video games. When I was 11, I was made to go out to play. There was no McDonald's, KFC or ready meals like today. I agree with your panel member that said that not all kids are obese. That's Mike Parry who said that. I think it's a complete joke that you can blame lockdown for childhood obesity. I'm now 63 years of age and I live in Vietnam. We've just come out of lockdown, which started in July, and yet there are no obese children here. It's about lazy British parents not feeding their children properly, taking them for burgers and fried chicken, claiming it's a treat when they're just too damn lazy to cook a healthy meal. David, thanks for your email and thanks for viewing all the way from Vietnam, a truly global show and a global television network, GB News. Tell your friends, spread the word, I should say, around the world, and let's change the world together. Now, let me get another email. This is from Sue. Sue says, "Hi, Mark, I'm 72. I've battled with my weight since I retired from work in 2004 and just don't run about as much anymore. It's hard for kids today because when I was young in the 50s, there was no such thing as having a crisp drawer or ice cream in the freezer. We're so much more affluent now and also bombarded with advertising all day long. Also, we were out playing in the streets, not indoors watching TV or on iPads. My 2 grandchildren have to cook a meal each week for them and their mum to help learn about cooking, which I think is a good thing, but it's hard work keeping them slim nowadays. You say kids a couple of decades ago weren't obese, but neither were adults." Sue, what a brilliant email and what a great set of points. I couldn't agree more. Do keep your opinions coming in. You know that the best bit of my show is when you drop me a line. mark@gbnews.uk. Austria has announced it will enter a full lockdown from Monday, lasting at least 10 days in a bid to avoid a 5th wave of COVID-19. Following the controversial decision to issue a lockdown for the unvaccinated, the Austrians will go one further on the 1st of February and will mandate COVID vaccines in the country by law. So you will have to receive the vaccine by law. No ifs, no buts. To react to this, let's head straight to Austria and speak to someone who is leading the organisation of a protest out there, activist Alexander Schugel. Hello, Alexander.
Hello, nice to be in your show.
Lovely to have you here. Guten Abend. Wie geht's denn? Servus, I should say, which is, I believe, the Austrian way of saying hello. Alexander, yes. Can you confirm that the actual COVID vaccine will be mandated by law in February?
That's what the government published today. They gave a speech and said that from the 1st of February, every Austrian has to be vaccinated, yes.
All right. Now, first of all, how has the media reacted? What is the sort of national public opinion in Austria, would you say?
It's very difficult to sum this up a little bit because we have such a broad variety of different media that obviously lots of the media are very much in favor of it, but there is a very big amount of, let's say, smaller media which is very much opposed to this new rule. Just to give you a little insight, since the beginning of the corona crisis, all the main media stations in Austria get additional funding by the state to publish the new corona rules and to also promote them. So obviously it's a little bit difficult to talk about media right now.
Well, that sounds very similar here in the UK, Alexander. What's your reaction to this news about the vaccine being a mandate?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that in Austria we have more than 2 million people not vaccinated. It's one of the lowest vaccination rates in Central Europe, and actually I'm very proud about this. It's interesting to see how everything developed. At the beginning they said, well, it's only a few weeks of wearing masks and lockdown, and then everything is over. And then they told us, well, it's only a second lockdown. Well, it's only a third lockdown. Well, you only have to keep distance. Last winter they told us, now we're going to implement the vaccination. Everyone can do it for free and completely, it's completely free choice to do it. And this summer we already knew this is definitely not the case, as they pushed and pushed and pushed. And when we saw them introducing the rule that you, as an unvaccinated person, can't enter a restaurant anymore, we knew exactly what we are heading for. And now we have it. We have a lockdown for the unvaccinated. Now we have a lockdown for everyone from Monday, but it will last only for 20 days. After the 20 days, it will continue to be a lockdown only for the unvaccinated again. And from the 1st of February, we are forced to take the shot.
Well, I think it's shocking news. I understand that you mentioned 2 million Austrians are unvaccinated. So adults vaccinated, we're looking at something like 60% of the population vaccinated, right? As opposed to over 85% here in the UK. Why the vaccine hesitancy? Why have so many people decided not to be vaccinated, would you say?
First of all, the Austrians are very freedom-loving people. Even though they publicly do not like to protest so much, if you talk to them personally, lots of them do not really like being forced to do something. So it's actually a very natural and very Austrian response to this whole thing. Second of all, following different news and different media, we found out that certain countries, even though having a high vaccination rate, still have a very high incidence and a very high number of people catching corona. And we saw at the same time that countries which did not try to push or to force us into doing anything actually had a way lower number. Let's, for example, compare Sweden with an incidence of 50 to, let's say, Ireland with a vaccination rate of about, I think, 90% of the adult people and an incidence similar to the Austrian incidence. So you see that vaccination or no vaccination did not really make the difference, but rather how you approach the virus itself. Do you approach it as something which you talk about normally, which you react normally to, or do you approach it as something extraordinary and something they all told us at the beginning, that it's a pandemic and so on? I know that all my Austrian friends at the beginning all took this whole pandemic very serious. They said, well, let's see, let's follow the rules of the government. But after a few months, the first huge contradictions were already visible. For example, when our government told us that the masks do not really work. And a few weeks later, they told us we have to wear masks. And then a few weeks later, we heard that there's now a huge deal within Austria, that a certain Austrian company gets to distribute FFP2 masks and therefore earns a little bit of money with it. And a few weeks later, we had to obligatory wear the FFP2 masks. So we saw that this doesn't really have anything to do with the corona measures and with the corona with the politics reacting to corona, but rather with the politicians using this unique situation to implement new rules onto Austria, like digital rules, certain new inventions which came in, which the Austrians are normally very much opposed to. For example, that cash is limited and things like this. Those ideas came up again, and at the end, I think lots of Austrians decided not to follow this and not to give in and not to let themselves be pressured into something they do not want. Especially as we in Austria are very aware of the severe side effects the vaccines can have.
Well, I'm well aware of the Austrians. It's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Amazing culture, amazing food, amazing landscape, of course. I've got family in Austria, and I do know the Austrian people to be very independent spirited, which is the real charm of the country. Let's bring my panel in. I want to ask about your planned protest, but we do have with us, Alexander, Benedict Spence and Mike Parry and Nikki Hodgson, who are all British journalists. While I get to them, can I ask you, here they come. Mike Parry, I know you're very pro-vaccine. I mean, I'm supportive of it. I'm double jabbed, but I don't think it should be mandated. What's your view?
Well, Alexander said that the Austrians are freedom-loving people, and I accept that. But they're also selfish and ignorant-loving people, because they don't understand that the one great weapon that started against COVID-19, and it largely started here in the United Kingdom, was the power of vaccination. Australia, not Austria, Australia, one of the original countries who said, we don't need to vaccinate our people, we're an island, we'll just close all our borders. Australia had one of the biggest problems in the world, and they've still got it. I mean, if Alexander can't see the stupidity of not encouraging people to get vaccinated, the greatest weapon we've got against a pandemic that came out of nowhere and we had to attack very, very quickly, then I'm sorry, Austria are not a freedom-loving country. They're rather an ignorant country, and you have a border with Germany, the border is with Bavaria. If this spreads into Germany, then you've started a new pandemic throughout Central Europe, and that is a very selfish thing to have done.
Alexander?
Well, it's first of all, thank you for all the insults. The very easy answer.
They weren't insults; they're observations. I'm sorry, I'm not insulting you. They're observations.
What comes out of all the calculations. Look at the statistics. Look at all the countries which do have a way higher vaccination rate than we have. This really did not change anything. Quite the contrary. And if you compare, for example, Australia, because you just mentioned it, I'm very much opposed to lockdowns. I think lockdowns are one of the biggest threats for health. As we all know from standard health education in school, that the biggest push for your immune system is to go out, meet other people and be in nature. And obviously, if you're locked down for more than 600 days, that's not the case anymore. So that's, for me, not a big miracle.
But Alexander, I'm sorry, you're talking about herd immunity. Herd immunity doesn't work.
And the countries which have the same rules as us for the higher vaccination rate do not prove to have a better outcome. Yes, there is a climate difference. So the countries which are still in a warmer climate zone have a lower incidence. But if you look at all the other countries, as I gave the example, Ireland, for example, very high vaccination rate. Or let's look at this little piece of England at the end of Spain, Gibraltar, with 100% vaccination rate, but a huge incidence. It doesn't really change
Alexander,
anything. The vaccine is not a game changer.
Alexander, I believe you're involved in a protest. Are you able to tell me what you're planning and when?
Yes, so I organised the first anti-corona protest last January. It was called Demonstration for Freedom. And then we decided to join the bigger demonstrations, and since then try to go to every bigger demonstration. Tomorrow, I think the biggest demonstration ever will happen in Austria. I never heard from so many people that they want to come. So we have different groups inviting. We have, well, obviously the Freedom Party. I think you will know that as the biggest organizer of the demonstrations tomorrow. But we have lots of independent groups. We have truck drivers, train drivers, doctors, nurses, and so on. All of them invite their friends and their co-workers to this huge demonstration. What do we expect? We expect this huge amount of people, first of all, to strengthen each other, to help each other to see they are not alone. There are people who understand them, and they are heard, actually. Their voice is being heard. And second of all, obviously, we want the Austrian government to step down. I don't know if you followed the Austrian news in the last months, but I bet you did. And you saw that our former Chancellor, Sebastian Kurz, had to step down due to a so-called corruption crisis. We don't have the details yet. And the new Chancellor, who was never elected by the people, rules Austria, Alexander Schallenberg. And obviously, we don't want this. We want to have a proper election representing the opinion and the voice of the people.
I know, the Austrian Gordon Brown. Can you imagine anything worse? Or Theresa May. Now, we've got to run. We've only got a few seconds. But do you think that these protests can have an impact? I mean, do you think that this mandate is going to happen in February? Because I just wonder how it's going to work logistically.
So it's against our constitution, so obviously it should not work. But I do not know yet how the mandate will be introduced. It can be that there won't be a mandate for everyone. But
well, Alexander, I'll have to interrupt you. The clock's against us. Good luck with your protest. This is GBNews. Thank you. So, lots more to come. And I can tell you that we have our Mark Meets guests this evening. I'll be joined by the author of an amazing new book. It's called A Romany Life. It's by Joe Smith. And it's life in a caravan for the first 10 years, a very loving family, but then bare-knuckle fighting and crime. It's an incredible story. So you can get your questions in, mark@gbnews.uk or on Twitter @GBNews. Also in FAQs, how do we tackle our mammoth COVID debt? I'll speak to a top think tank that believe we should be looking at the possibility of a Churchill solution. Winston Churchill, that is. So all of that to come. Don't forget, in 2 minutes' time, my comments on Andrew Neil's departure from GB News. I'm breaking my silence. Don't go anywhere.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A change in wind direction and a change in weather during the next 24 hours. Mild at first, rain then sinks south. That's associated with a cold front, so colder, brighter weather follows. But the cold front lingering for a time overnight across northern Scotland, bringing some persistent rain here before it finally pushes south across the country through Saturday and Saturday night. And then we open the door to northerlies, much colder but brighter weather following for Sunday itself. Nevertheless, the mild air remains for Friday night. A lot of cloud cover, some breaks in the east, but generally it's cloudy skies and persistent rain there for northern Scotland, pepping up a little bit, I think, during the early hours. A mild night to come once again, perhaps not as mild as it has been, but temperatures still above average for the time of year as we start off the weekend. A lot of cloud in the sky, the cloud thick enough to give some light outbreaks of rain in the west and the south, some hill fog. A wet start, though, for northern Scotland. That rain then moves through Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland during the late morning, pushing into northern England and North Wales by the afternoon. Mild in the south, colder air follows in the north with some blustery showers, and it's cold enough for some snow over the hills of Scotland in this airflow. But as the, cloud and those outbreaks of rain sink south on Saturday night, that cold air floods south for all of us. And so by the start of Sunday, those temperatures are much lower than they have been during recent mornings. We're looking at a touch of frost for some sheltered spots across the northern half of the UK. But there'll be plenty of brightness in the sky to compensate. Blue skies for many. There will be an area of clouds sinking south into central and southern parts of the UK, and there'll be showers pushing into eastern, northern and some southwestern coasts. But away from those showers, in the sunshine, perfectly pleasant, if a little colder than it has been recently. Plenty of bright weather on Monday, cloudier on Tuesday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A massive hour or two to come. Coming up in Mark Meets, I sit down live with Joe Smith, the extraordinary man who went from Romany gypsy via crime and bare-knuckle fighting to golfing superstardom. His book's out. It's an incredible story. Plus, we'll tackle more of the day's top stories in the news agenda with my fantastic panel of radio legend Mike Parry, sensational author and dating expert Nikki Hodgson, and revered political journalist Benedict Spence. And in just 2 minutes' time, that's right, in just 2 minutes' time, I'll be making my first live on-air comments in a personal capacity only about Andrew Neil and his controversial departure from GB News. That's in 2 minutes' time. You won't want to miss it. Turn the sound up. But first, the news with Karen Roberts.
Hello, thank you, Mark. These are your latest headlines. Counter-terrorism police have confirmed that the bomb, which exploded outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital on Sunday, had been packed with ball bearings. They say it could have caused significant injury or death had it exploded in the way the bomber intended. Detectives are examining the possibility that the motion of the taxi stopping suddenly may have caused the improvised device to detonate prematurely. Double child killer Colin Pitchfork has been arrested and recalled to prison just 2 months after his release. It's understood Pitchfork was returned to custody earlier today over a breach of his licence conditions. His re-release will be a matter for the parole board. Pitchfork was jailed for life after raping and strangling 15-year-olds Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth in Leicestershire in 1983 and 1986. US teenager Kyle Rittenhouse has been found not guilty of all charges following a shooting in Wisconsin, in a trial which has divided America. Mr. Rittenhouse killed 2 white men and injured another when he opened fire during protests that rocked the town of Kenosha last year. The 18-year-old collapsed in court as he was acquitted of all charges after pleading self-defense in the shootings that became a flashpoint in the nation's debate over guns and vigilantism. The jury came back with its verdict after nearly 3.5 days of deliberation. President Joe Biden has commented on the verdict, saying it will leave many Americans feeling angry and concerned, including himself, but later voiced his confidence in the jury system and urged everyone to express their views peacefully.
I stand by what the jury has concluded. The jury system works and we have to abide by it.
The UK is seeking to ban the group Hamas, designating it a terrorist organisation. The move, if approved by Parliament, would bring British policy in line with the EU and the US. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says Hamas has significant terrorist capability that includes access to extensive and sophisticated weaponry and terrorist training facilities. Supporters of the Palestinian Islamist group could face up to 10 years in prison. A Hamas official has described the decision as biased towards Israel. COVID booster jabs have been added to the travel pass. Millions of people who've had 3 doses can now prove their status with the NHS app. It means people can visit countries where vaccinations are only valid for a certain amount of time without having to quarantine. Austria will enter a full national lockdown for at least 10 days from Monday. Unvaccinated citizens were told to stay at home last month, but Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg says nationwide restrictions are now needed to try to contain a 4th wave of COVID cases. You are right up to date now. Back to Mark Dolan tonight.
It's time now for an occasional item that I do on the show. It's just my view, my words and my opinion. And it's called We Feel Your Pain, in which I reach out to a famous celebrity that's going through a tough time. Tonight, the former chairman and presenter of GBNews, Andrew Neil. This highly respected journalist of almost 50 years standing has this week described his decision to join GBNews as probably the biggest single mistake of my career. He said he was still haunted by the shambles of its launch. He described the channel as a UKIP tribute band and said it risks falling into irrelevance and obscurity. Now, I'll be honest, the relationship didn't start brilliantly, with Andrew pointing out in an email that he'd been flown to the GBNews launch from his homes in Monaco in the south of France in the world's smallest private jet. The world's smallest private jet. How could they? Andrew has previously spoken movingly in an interview with the Mail newspaper about the pain of all the technical problems at the start. Microphones not coming on when they're supposed to, cameras out of focus, and guests suddenly unavailable on video link. Yes, GBNews is a start-up, a brand new channel built from scratch in months rather than years as it normally would take. But this is Andrew Neil we're talking about. He deserves better. Andrew recalls movingly the moment when, at the end of his first week, he decided he couldn't go on. The whole situation left him in despair. Yes, lots of people have been through hell in the course of this pandemic, but it can't have been worse than microphones not coming on, cameras out of focus, and guests not available on video link, and tiny private jets. After presenting the last of his 9 shows, that's right, 9 shows, Andrew tells the interviewer at the Mail that his personal driver was able to get to the studios to whip him straight over to the airport and straight to the south of France. Given his show ended at 9 p.m. and he was in the air by 10, I can only guess it was a private jet, because Ryanair are quick, but they're not that quick. If it was a private jet, I hope it was a bigger one than the small one he was in previously. A tiny private jet. No sooner had his good-sized jet pierced the clouds, he goes on, that he had a glass of champagne in his hands. And I can't think of anyone that deserved that more after 9 whole days of hell. It's been really difficult without Andrew, I'm not going to lie. Yes, our daytime and evening ratings have grown significantly and we've had over 1 billion views online. But we really miss having someone so positive and so constructive around the place. Someone that really backs the team that he was part of creating. Those talented young journalists and presenters were looking forward to having you as a mentor, Andrew, but you taught them a different lesson. Andrew is none too happy with some of our outputs, and he called me, wait for it, a shock jock. I was shocked. I thought he was the jock. Look, Andrew Neil has a huge future. He may even go back to the licence fee-funded BBC, which would be confusing because he started GBNews to be anti-woke. But Andrew knows best. If he does go back to the Beeb or that Spectator TV show he does in his bedroom, I just hope he's able to get through more than 9 shows. But if he doesn't, who could blame him? The guy's only human. So please set aside your own selfish concerns as we navigate our way out of a pandemic and the biggest recession in 300 years, and spare a thought for the former chairman of GB News and presenter for 9 days. 9 days he won't get back, Andrew Neil. Andrew, we feel your pain. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. Let's talk about vaccines. Strong views from Anne, who says, Mark, I do not agree with compulsory vaccines, but it's those who are unvaccinated that are threatening the freedom of the majority. You cannot use Sweden as a comparison to the UK. It is physically the same size, yet has 1/6 of the population, plus 50% of Swedes live alone. And it's been proved COVID spreads most rapidly in households. Gillian says, Mark, can someone please tell your guest Mike Parry that shouting and insulting the opposition does not make him right? Even Boris has admitted that vaccines do not stop transmission of the virus. It's a simple fact that renders vax passes and mandatory vaccines useless, no matter how loudly you shout otherwise. Let's have a look. We've got Don, who says your Austrian correspondent is simply wrong. Vaccination is highly effective. The science is not really a matter of debate. It's idiotic to suggest otherwise. Getting vaccinated is a matter of common sense and decency. Well, should we have a mandatory vaccine in this country? I say no. Over my dead body. But what do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Get your opinions through. Mark at gbnews.uk. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, sport and showbiz, as well as those simply with a big story to tell. And they don't get much bigger or more compelling than that of Joe Smith, a man who spent the first 10 years of his life as a Romany gypsy in a caravan with his loving family, and with a few bumps along the way, including some crime and bare-knuckle fighting. But in the end, he became a sporting star and is now a successful entrepreneur. The book about his life is out now. It's called Kushti, A Romany Life. It's co-authored by the brilliant journalist Martin Knight, and it's the revised edition. It's expanded following its selection by The Observer as Sport Book of the Year. And I'm delighted to say that the legendary Joe Smith joins me now. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Mark. Pleasure, mate.
Are we safe enough to shake hands?
I think so.
Listen, the book's out. What a read. Let's start at the beginning. You had a very happy, loving childhood. You spent the first 10 or 11 years of your life as a Romany gypsy, and you were in the caravan. Now, society would paint that as somehow perhaps a sort of sad story, but for you it was a very happy one.
Well, it certainly wasn't sad. It was very loving, as you said. I had wonderful, wonderful parents, no longer with me, bless them, passed on. But we were bathed in love. I said to somebody recently, we may not have had High Street branded toys to play with, but we found a way of keeping ourselves active and happy. So no, certainly not that. It was a happy childhood for me, although it wasn't schooling for me personally, but I was with my mum and dad always, and it was good.
And what was it about your childhood that was so happy? I mean, your parents, I guess, were around a lot of the time, and you had freedom.
Well, I was constantly with my dad. From obviously time I could remember, I was obviously in my mother's arms at some point, but from the age of 4 or 5 year old, I was away with my dad, and it was a wonderful life.
Yeah, and your dad was selling sort of metals.
He was a scrap metal trader, and he would take that wherever he went. You know, he had those skills, and it was fantastic. So my dad was a gambling man, a drinking man, and the characters I met from no schooling, you know, I felt like I grew up very quick.
Yeah.
But it may look a bit, you know, from somebody else a bit maybe not glamorising, but it was a great childhood for me, you know.
And did you connect with the more sort of grounded aspects of society when you were growing up? I mean, did you have pals that went to school and that, you know, lived in houses and flats?
No, not for the first 10 or 11 years. We would meet children. One of our regular staying places during the summer months would be Portsmouth. And I remember meeting the kids. We would stay on some land and meet the kids from the flats and the houses nearby, and they would ask us, like, you know, things like, how do you manage to have a wash and a wee and a poo and all this? And I would say stuff like, but your dad gets up at that time every day and he has to be back at that time. And so there were different worlds, but we used to play together and interact, and that was lovely. And we waved them off after the 3 or 4 week stay or the 6 week stay. So there was good memories, but there were different worlds. At that stage, I only knew one world. So the interaction was just here and there, really.
Yeah, and I mean, what was life like for those first 10 years? I mean, were you on the move? I think for most of the year you stayed in one place, right?
No, we were on the move because what had happened, whilst I'm a West Londoner, born and fairly bred, if you like, my grandparents had some land that they owned, but they were only licensed for 2 caravans. So my dad couldn't get on there. So we sort of stayed around nearby to where my grandparents was. And then my gran was widowed in 1968. She went to the famous Epsom Downs racing. Quite a traditional place for Romany gypsies, and she got a puncture on the way back, and that was in Epsom town, and she so happened to, all my family are now settled and residing in houses and on a permanent site in Epsom. So for me it was, we flit around between Epsom and Hounslow, and that was about, but so really we were still nomadic, but nomadic locally, if you like.
Yeah.
And we only got settlement in our house when my dad's family grew to an extension where, you know, he needed some settlement.
And was that after about 10 or 11 years?
Yeah.
And how was that transition to being in bricks and mortar?
Oh, it was strange. I remember we do all these crazy things in life, but we were nervous. Me and my brothers and sisters were scared to walk upstairs in the house. Wow. It was strange initially, you know. It's not anymore, of course, but it was.
Well, did it feel like you were kind of at a great height looking down?
No, we just didn't know what was up there.
Really?
You know, it was really
the
that alien. It was the unknown. It was that alien. It didn't take us too long to adapt, but
yeah. And did you miss that itinerant life? I mean, did it suddenly feel very boring being stuck in one place?
Well, no, not really, because we were round the corner from my grandparents, and we're still in touch doing the things.
Yeah.
And we'd still do some travelling in the summer months. So my dad was still like off for a month or so. So we stayed in touch with the nomadic side of things, if you like.
Yeah.
But we had then a settlement, so no, we didn't really miss it too much.
And when you were a little boy and a travelling Romany gypsy, take me through a classic day, because there's no sort of school holidays or term time. probably not too much of a difference between a weekday or the weekends. So take me through the day. Let's imagine you're 8 or 9 years of age. You wake up early. Did your dad get you up early?
Yeah, the dad was always a working man. You know, as I say, he was a drinking man, gambling man, but he had to fund that, you know, and feed us guys, which he did.
What age were you recruited into the firm?
I've literally done physical work since 7 years of age. Literally, my dad obviously would give me some safe job to do to get me in the way of working. But I've literally worked since I've been 7 years of age. But a typical day would be, say from 7, 8, 9 years of age, up in the morning, work with Dad. So, you know, he'd see his regular customers, if you like, or tout him for some business, if you like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd load that up and, you know, he'd do his trading, get a bit in the middle, and then I'll be back. Dad might have his couple afternoon jars, and we'd be back home. I'll be playing with the kids, practicing some golf or practicing some boxing, you know, a bit like that, really.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is obviously the big aspect of your life is sport, as well as, you know, the aspects of your childhood that are detailed in, you know, with wonderful nostalgia in the book. So let's talk about how you got involved in golf.
Yeah, so my grandfather, my dad's dad, he was an ex-professional boxer, and he needed a substitute for his sport when the curtain come down through age, father time, and he went into golf, and I would pull his trolley from about 6, 7 years of age, and I would nick a ball out the top of his bag, let him walk down some 70, 80 yards, put it on a tee and give it a whack. And I was doing it with great regularity, and they would then turn, so where's this ball come from? Ask my little grandson, right? And really, can he do that? Yeah, he can do that with regularity. So they allowed me to play the par threes, and I was encouraged into golf. You know, from there on, I just loved it. I couldn't get enough of it.
And what was it about golf that you enjoyed so much? Was it a different world? Because, I mean, you were suddenly in some of these rather nice golf clubs. Was it a sort of different world in which to move around? And
yeah, I mean, it was. Felt like we were treading eggshells a bit. It was a bit. We were on tenterhooks a bit, if it's the right word, maybe. They were posh, nice places, and you know, with nice dress codes and all that. And they were a little bit alien to us, a bit out of our area, if you like. But we soon adapted. You know, I mean, as I went through the ranks, of course, there was commonplace for me. But initially, very much so.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you did so well as a youngster. You were the club champion, you achieved the course record, Grand Challenge Cup, London Junior Open winner. I think you were presented with a trophy by the Prime Minister's husband at the time, Dennis Thatcher.
Correct, yeah.
So what age would you have been when you won the London Junior Open?
I would have been right at the very age of 15, 16. It was in July of 87, so I think I was just on my 16th birthday.
Yeah. So you've had a good 10, 11 years with your family. Then you've got into golf, introduced to that by your dear, much loved and missed grandfather.
Yeah.
It's all going swimmingly, but just at the point where you win that wonderful trophy, it all goes horribly wrong.
Yeah. I was playing away in Hampshire, Basingstoke. I won a Junior Open there. And at the presentation, my dad was given a £3 or £4 bar bill for some sandwiches, which me and my playing partners had given him at the halfway break. You know, we got those sandwiches included in our entry. So we thought they were ours. We'd finished them, given them to my dad and my brother. Waste not, want not type thing.
Absolutely.
So in principle, my dad refused to pay it, and there was an hearing at the golf club, and then they manufactured so many lies. You bear in mind, this dispute's with my dad, not with me.
Yeah.
You know, even, you know, I think my dad's 1,000,000% not guilty of doing any wrongdoing, but...
Yeah.
But the moral of the story is the beef should have been with him if there was any beef, yeah? But they put it to me, manufactured loads of lies, and asked me for my resignation in a golf club. I said, resignation? What does that mean? I didn't even know...
You did not know the word resignation?
Didn't even know. I was so young and naive to these committees and places. I didn't even know the word resignation, honestly.
Yeah.
And I come out of the place in tears, and it was a train wreck in the nicest way, it wasn't for the right word, but it was a train wreck for my career. It was a complete derailment.
And by the way, I mean, was prejudice, wasn't it, against perhaps your background? Because I know that for one of these particular championships that you won, the BBC, I think, or some journalists were present.
That's right.
And they made it a really good news story about your talents and about your background. And then rightly, they spotted a great story.
Yeah.
And perhaps this was used against you too, essentially prejudice against being a Romany gypsy.
Well, it transpired, it became factual. I could quickly tell you why it became fact. You could have begged to differ and found other areas maybe why it happened, but I'll tell you why it was factual. My friend and sidekick at the time that I used to play and practice with was a guy called Andreas Kikides. And when I left the golf club, was asked to, I basically kicked out. His friend that then became his sidekick was a policeman's son. They got caught stealing out the pro shop. It wasn't Andreas, it was the policeman's son, but he was done by association. But the policeman's son had got a 6-month suspension for stealing out the Ed pro shop. I mean, this is the guy that you should look up to. He's your governor in that field. And then Len Roberts, a professional, a really well-respected PGA professional, and a man I really looked up to, he was seemed to have really going out of his, raising his voice and saying, where is the justice? The 16-year-old gypsy lad, who would have taken a tea too many, would have told me the policeman's son comes and nicks from my shop, and gets a 6-month suspension. 6 months, he's back. Where's my gypsy friend? Where's the Romany gypsy lad?
Yeah.
Gone forever. So, it was quite a painful situation at that time.
Well, I think it's incredible that you came through it. There is a lot of injustice, but it's mainly you sort of triumphing over all of that negativity, that prejudice. And you're the man you are now, very successful entrepreneur, happy family in your own right. You're not on the move, you're not in a caravan. You're still going up that staircase.
I've got the staircase,
Still entering the unknown.
Yeah, unknown,
But look, briefly, with the time against us, you have had this amazing story, but it wasn't all smooth and plain sailing, was it? I mean, not just your expulsion from this golf club, which was a big setback, but you got involved in bare knuckle fighting, which I guess is a very traditional sport. We shouldn't be too judgmental about it, but it's a rough sport, isn't it? I think you started fighting when you were quite young, 7 or 8.
6, 7,
6.
yeah. 6,
you were
7,
very good at it, right? You won a lot of fights.
Yeah, well, I won my fights. So I was,
But it wasn't really your scene, was it? And I know when you got into it when you were older, in your teens, it's not exactly a happy time, I don't think.
Well, it wasn't so much the knuckle fighting was quite fair, but it was when I won the knuckle fights, people would start to massage your ego and big you up, and then you're into other areas from it. So it wasn't the actual fighting, because although it's brutal to some people, if it's within you to do and you both agree, it's maybe not so brutal, right? Okay, but it's the things that the branches that lead from
and
it,
all the politics around it, right? And lots of Don Kings start popping up, and you're being used and exploited, and
exactly.
You talked about people being nice to you, but it's fake.
Exactly, and it's exactly, and then suddenly, and it's we have an heavier firm than you, and we got him on our firm and all that stuff, and that was really crap, and that's I really. I can't change that, but that's the message I'd like to get out there for these youngsters. Please don't go down that road, because that really wasn't pleasant. It never was, and it never will be. So that was a bit of a bumpy road.
Bare knuckle fighting, I mean, this is fighting with no gloves,
no gloves, no gum shield, no bandage in my days.
So tell me about the injuries.
Well, you've broken bones in your hands and cuts and things, but
really,
but it's part and parcel of you're in the lion's den. That's what you expected.
You're in the lion's den. Okay, and then obviously you got all through that. There was a bit of crime, but it was not, it wasn't sort of crime against individuals. You were, sort of, it was an inevitable sort of perhaps consequence of the things that happened to you in your teens. But here you are now. Tell me about today. I mean, the book's out. You're a published author, and you're back in your father's business. Making money.
We're making a living, thank God. We go to work, we work hard, we make a little bit in the middle, and we're still an ambitious golfer. And I've been very, very fortunate to have seen. Now I'm sitting right on the fence, and I can see both sides Romany life in mainstream, and I love it. And as you rightly said earlier, I've had a bit of prejudice towards, but look, they're just like a knock in the bruise from a knuckle fight. You get up, you dust yourself down, you go, and I've got so many friends from both sides. Example, if I had a party of 200-300 people, I'd have 150 non-Romany, 150 Romany. So I just got friends from everywhere. It's been a great life, really.
I've been in the presence of greatness.
Thank you very much.
And it's great to shake the hand that's been in so many bare-knuckle fights.
Thanks kindly, Mark.
You could dust me off in a couple of seconds, if we're honest. The book is out. Here it is. Sebastian, get me a nice shot of that. Look at that. Kushti, A Romany Life. It's a fabulous book. It's a great read, very inspirational. It's by Joe Smith and Martin Knight, and it's out now. Thank you so much, Joe. Coming up, what would you do if you were offered your unlimited holiday time. That's right, you're at work and you've got unlimited holidays. One stockbrokers in London has done just that. We'll discuss it in the news agenda with my fantastic panel. But after the break, in Frequently Asked Questions, does the national debt matter? It's £2 trillion. Who's going to pay it? We'll speak to the Adam Smith Institute's Dr. Eamon Butler. He thinks Winston Churchill has the answer. See you in 2.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
It's time now for FAQs, Frequently Asked Questions, in which we take a deep dive into a topic in or around the news. Tonight, does the national debt matter? The government has borrowed hundreds of billions of pounds in response to the COVID pandemic. This has led to a record peacetime debt totalling £2.2 trillion, representing 97% of gross domestic product. So how should we tackle this colossal economic challenge going forward? Or is this simply a debt that we can archive away for future generations to worry about? Does it disappear? Does it become abstract? Well, with me to discuss this is the co-author of a report on the country's finances by the renowned economic think tank, the Adam Smith Institute. And from there is Dr. Eamon Butler. Hello, Dr. Butler.
Hi.
Thanks very much for joining us. Dr. Butler, you're suggesting in your fascinating report a Churchillian solution to the national debt. Tell me more.
Well, it's a bit complicated. As you said, we do have a very, very, very large national debt. It's equivalent to 95% of the nation's annual earnings, and it's twice as high as it was 20 years ago. And around about a quarter of that debt is what we've spent in the last year battling COVID. It's gone on furloughs and loans and welfare payments, and of course the lack of tax receipts hasn't helped. So a quarter of the national debt is COVID, and we see that COVID expenditure is really a sort of 1 in 100 year thing. I mean, the last big pandemic we had was 1918, and you get wars occasionally. So we think that you should treat that element rather differently and do what Churchill did to pay for the First World War, which is to say you issue debt, but you issue IOUs, but you don't put a final a repayment date on them. So you just carry on paying them until the economy is in a better state than it is today. And that's how Churchill financed the First World War. We didn't actually pay that off until 2014. So you've got plenty of time to think about it. And the benefit is that gets the sort of COVID debt out of the equation, and then you can focus on the real problem, which is the government's day-to-day overspending.
Yes, well, I think that's not a bad shout, because as you could say, you say we could focus on the deficit at that point, which of course is separate. The deficit is different to the national debt. The deficit is sort of daily expenditure, and if you're running a deficit, then more is going out than is coming in. We anticipate, don't we, a deficit for the next 3 or 4 years at least, and that's the immediate priority.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the government, despite the fact that taxes are going up as higher than they've ever been in 70 years, since the 1950s, when indeed Churchill was Prime Minister. We're talking about taking a third of the gross national product, the nation's earnings, in tax. Despite all that, the government still isn't balancing its books, and it's adding to its credit card bill every year. And this year, we're adding 180,000 million pounds to the national debt. And over the next 5 years, we're going to add another 300,000 million pounds. That's a total of about £18,000 per household. It's a lot of money, and that's just the extra. The national debt itself is more equivalent to about £72,000 per household. You know, that's the amount which the government owes.
Well, yes, and my view is now about balancing their budget, whether it's a mortgage or paying for the car slowly, credit cards, the overdraft. You know, regular people, the public, understand debt, but it seems like politicians are very cavalier about debt. And the problem is, it's us that ultimately foot the bill.
Well, absolutely. Somebody's got to pay it. And I think it's actually quite immoral that we should be overspending today and saying to our children, well, you can pay that off in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years' time. It's immoral for one thing. It's okay, you know, to borrow. We all borrow for investments. Yes, you borrow for a house, you borrow for a car because you get the services from the car, the use of the car. But the trouble is that the governments say that they're borrowing to invest. You know, we're investing in transport, investing in education, we're investing in healthcare. When in fact, what they're actually doing is simply spending, and they're spending more and more. And hoping that future generations will be mug enough to come and actually pay that bill. It's pretty outrageous, really. We ought to stop them borrowing at all.
Why hasn't the Chancellor had an idea like your Churchill bond?
I don't think it's occurred to him. I think, COVID is one of these things where you just had to spend money, really. You didn't have to think about it. It was like the financial crisis 10 years ago. It's like a war. You've just got to spend money, and you'll probably get it wrong on what you spend and how you spend it, but you've just got to do it and get the cash out of the door and get something done. So I don't think he had time to think about it, and I don't think he had any time at all to think about how is this going to be paid for. The normal way of paying for it, and how we've been doing it so far, is that you issue IOUs with a 10-year or 20-year or 30-year repayment date. So you give people an IOU, you sell people an IOU, and then you give them money, a certain sum every year, until, say, 10 years, and then you have to repay the whole IOU. But in 10 years, you don't know what the economy is going to be like. There may be another shock, another problem. So you're facing £500 billion worth of borrowing, all coming to fruition in a very short period, and you may not be in a good position to do that. So what we've done really since the Napoleonic Wars in the 1800s is we've looked at that 1 in 100 year sort of debt, that emergency spending, and we said, right, we're not going to pay. That's going to take a long time to pay off. We don't pay off that bit immediately. So let's have this what's called consols, which is long-term debt, which can be paid off when the economy has grown strong enough to do that.
Well, Dr. Eamon Butler, what's your prognosis for the British economy and the national debt? Because I doubt that the Treasury will be as creative as you are suggesting. Assuming that the Chancellor hopes to grow his way out of this crisis, to tax us a little more and continue to borrow, where do you see Britain in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think that is the problem, that the only way out of a debt of this size, and as I say, isolating the COVID debt is a good way to focus on the rest of the overspending, and it is absolutely exceedingly serious that we're just spending and spending and spending more every year. And the only way out of that is to grow your economy. You have to make yourself richer. And then your debts become more and more manageable because you're better off, you've got more cash. And I don't see the government doing anything like enough to encourage new business, to encourage small businesses in particular, to encourage entrepreneurs, to put down the infrastructure that's needed for business and reform business rates and do things like that. We need a growth agenda. We need an entrepreneurship agenda. And unless we have that, then I think that we're just going to be borrowing and spending more and more and taxing more and more, and then we're going to end up like Eastern Europe used to be.
Eamon, it's been a fascinating, if troubling, conversation. My thanks to the co-author of a report on the country's finances by the renowned economic think tank, the Adam Smith Institute, Dr. Eamon Butler. Are you worried about the national debt? Do you think the Chancellor should do more to tackle it, or is it something that can be archived away and dealt with by future generations? Many would argue that interest rates are historically low. It's almost cost neutral for the government to borrow. But I'd love to know your thoughts on that one. Mark at gbnews.uk. Coming up in Uncensored, we're going to the United States. We're going to speak to the top author and US commentator, Carol Roth, a huge critic of Joe Biden and his administration. And she says that lockdowns were a gift to big business, and they have killed small businesses along the way with the complicity of the US government. She's an amazing regular on US TV news you won't want to miss. Carol Roth, live at 11 o'clock. American economics in crisis. But up next in the news agenda with my brilliant panel, is it the end of the great school uniform rip-off? We'll discuss that and much more, plus your emails. See you in 2.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
I will get to your opinions very shortly on email mark@gbnews.uk. Now, we're just organising our little system at the moment. We're getting the camera set up because this is a brand new startup, by the way, and we're very, very proud of that. So lots to get through. By the way, can I tell you that we'll be going stateside? I'm looking forward to my interview in Uncensored with a top US journalist and commentator who's talking about the fact that American capitalism is under attack by its own government and big business as well. So we'll talk about American economics in crisis. But still with me, my fabulous panel. Yes, indeed, we're looking at tomorrow's newspaper headlines and tonight's big stories. And we'll get to your front pages very shortly. In fact, let me just see whether I've got a few now, because young Matthew came in with some excellent headlines. How about this from the Daily Mail? Exposed, cruel anti-vaxxers at school gates. A former school governor is running an anti-vax group that has picketed over 100 schools, the Daily Mail reveals today. Francesca Dill is behind Outreach Worldwide, whose 50 UK chapters target pupils with dangerous conspiracy theories. The 32-year-old mother has posted social media footage of herself telling children the COVID jab is deadly and could leave girls infertile. She also claims falsely that many deaths of youngsters are being covered up. Her group, which includes a veteran teacher, youth mentor and a social worker, also serves head teachers with notices of liability if they allow pupils to be jabbed at school. Classical bad boy Nigel's rage against woke and the BBC. Nigel Kennedy criticising extreme political correctness, a legendary classical violinist, of course. Next up, should we go to the Daily Telegraph? Patel plans Greek-style clampdown on migrants. Asylum seekers will have to obey strict rules at new holding centres or face rejection. Austria, first European country to make jabs mandatory. OK, where should we go next? OK, how about the Mirror? Let's have a look at the Mirror. Freed killer back inside. Child murderer Pitchfork approached lone women. Colin Pitchfork has been sent back to prison amid fears over his behaviour. The double killer had been approaching young women, sources said, after being released on licence in September. One of his child victims' mums said it's a safer place when he is behind bars. Who could disagree with that one? Let's have a look at the Star now when we come to it, Daily Star newspaper, with always an entertaining headline. Let's take a look at this. Can be guaranteed to deliver some light relief. Benny Hill scuttles wokies. That's right, bedwetters lose fight to keep comic off the telly. Benny Hill is to return to the national television airwaves. And I'll be honest with you, I grew up with Benny Hill and found him very funny, but I don't know whether he's a bit un-PC for this current generation. So now let's see what else we've got. I do want to keep your emails coming in. So mark@gbnews.uk is where you can find me. So do... Brilliant. We've got the Times now. Let's have a look at the Times newspaper. PM demands migrant fix. New minister drafted in to stop channel crossings amid exasperation over rising numbers. Boris Johnson has ordered a cross-Whitehall review into the migrant crisis after being exasperated by his government's failure to stem the numbers. The Prime Minister is concerned that there are still no viable policies to reduce the number of channel crossings. Some 24,500 migrants have crossed in small boats this year alone, almost triple the number that arrived last year. Clearly an ongoing issue that has to be dealt with by this government. OK, next up, we've got The Guardian. Let's have a look at what they're saying. Tories fueling racism by rejecting multiculturalism. The rejection of multiculturalism by successive governments has helped fuel vulgar racism of the kind experienced by Asim Rafiq, according to the lead author of a seminal report. Biku Parek, former chair of the Commission on the Future of Multi-Ethnic Britain, said he was deeply disturbed by the cricketer's testimony. Lord Parek's report, published in 2000 as part of a commission established by the Runnymede Trust, shaped much of New Labour's policy on multiculturalism, with the then Home Secretary Jack Straw heralding it as the most important contribution to the national debate on racial discrimination for many years. How about the independents? Let's have a look at this. 18 months of financial squeeze for the vulnerable. Pensioners and Britain's most vulnerable families are set to be hit by an 18-month squeeze on their finances as the cost of living rises. I'm going to be focusing a lot on the cost of living crisis because I know that it's one of your biggest priorities. So many people have been sent into financial hardship because not only of unemployment and the cost of the pandemic, but inflation, because not only are goods rising, whether it's heating your home or, of course, going to the supermarket, but the value of the money that goes into your back pocket from work, your pay packet, also drops too. So it's a double whammy. And we'll be focusing on that in the days and weeks to come. Now, the Daily Express, £85 billion spending spree. Now, that's a Merry Christmas. Britain is determined to spread the Christmas cheer with an 85 billion quid shopping bonanza. That's right. Of course, you know that 60% of our economy is based on consumption. The Daily Express are hugely enthusiastic about the idea of all of us getting out there and spending what little cash we may have. So there you go. Those are your front pages. Fantastic stuff. Still with me, my panel. I'm delighted to say Nikki Hodgson, Benedict Spence and Mike Parry. You're all very welcome. And of course, let's get to this. A fresh slice of COVID dystopia. A Welsh cinema has been forced to close after refusing to ask for COVID passports. Since Monday, people have been required to show an NHS COVID pass in Wales to legally enter cinemas, theatres and concert halls. But the owner of Cinema & Co in Swansea, Anne Redfern, described the law as a total infringement of our human rights. Swansea Council forced her to close for defying the law, and notices were pinned outside the premises, stating the business had not carried out a COVID risk assessment. Since then, a crowdfunder for the cinema has been set up and raised nearly £40,000. So, will we reach a point where COVID restrictions are simply met with civil disobedience? Because I do wonder whether eventually, Nikki, the public will say no more.
Yeah, I mean, this is deeply troubling. And I say this as someone who has a husband who works in hospitality. He owns several bars. And so we have really...
I can't imagine what you saw in him, by the way.
Yeah, me
Well, what made you fall in love with that man that owns loads of bars?
Very coincidental, isn't it? Yeah, so, I mean, you know, he's been through the ringer over the past couple of years, watching... what we thought the business, we thought everything was going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And then, the government didn't put the funding up. There was that famous Friday when Boris wouldn't shut the pubs, but he shut every other business. So, everything was kind of falling through the cracks.
Do you remember the bonkers curfew, that 10 p.m. nonsense?
That ridiculous curfew, then everybody packed into the shit. I mean, just everything they've tried with hospitality has been an absolute abject failure. And, my husband's very lucky in that his businesses have survived, but thousands of businesses haven't. And this is kind of the kicker, because the thing about vaccine passes, COVID passes, is that they don't stop the spread of COVID. So, it's all well and good having something that's designed to stop the transmission of illness, but we know that the vaccinated and the unvaccinated are equally capable of passing on COVID. And so, it is not common sense, and it's not scientific sense either.
Well, no, we've seen, Benedict, countries with COVID passes like Scotland and Wales, cases rose. England has resisted them, cases fell.
The thing that always strikes me about COVID is, because it's a notifiable disease, the law was already in place, so that businesses that were concerned that individuals might be carrying it could already inquire as to what their status was, whether or not they'd taken a test for it. That is the current situation. If you actually do believe that somebody is at risk of potentially carrying a disease for which you need to notify the authorities, you can inquire and you can refuse them service if that's actually something that is of a major concern. So the law already exists for the individual businesses themselves. All this is ultimately is a sort of a top-down approach from a local government to try to take back a sort of a measure of control over people. And, this is a one-off business that's saying, well, we're not really prepared to do this. But actually, I think over time, you'll see a lot more businesses, this one's being very sort of public about it, but you'll get a lot more sort of sotto voce kind of cases of people going, well, we're legally obliged to, but we're not going to.
Yeah.
This is a business that's actually making a point. But, I actually know of plenty of other cases, not just in the UK, but in other countries where COVID passes is the case, certain countries where, you walk past a pub, for example, and depending on how many, beer bottles are put outside, you can tell that one will take you whether or not you have a pass or not. So actually, this is already, it's becoming a sort of a two-tier system where you'll have some businesses that are prepared to ask for the passes and a lot that aren't. But ultimately, it is that sort of, it's that mission creep. It's, you know, bringing in lots of different measures. You know, we're talking earlier in the show, weren't we, to the gentleman in Austria talking about what's the extreme end of the scale? Well, you have lockdowns, you know, and this is sort of the less extreme end of the scale. But nonetheless, it is all on a spectrum. And ultimately, people, I don't think, broadly, are particularly in favour of this, especially, as Nikki says, the businesses that this will ultimately end up affecting.
Mike, nasty though the virus is, it's not the bubonic plague. It doesn't merit this tyranny.
No, it doesn't at all. This is not a good example, is it, this particular cinema in Swansea? Because it's not really a cinema. It's a
cafe.
Exactly, a cafe and a hall and all that kind of stuff. Shouldn't we really be focusing on cinemas which are full for people to watch the new James Bond film? Because they are full, because people want to see the James Bond film. It was delayed for so long. And I'd like to know how they're coping, because if you pick on a little... It's almost like a people's cinema, isn't it? You know what I mean? And
almost like a community centre.
Community centre, and also, I've seen some pictures of it, the seats are not joined to each other like they are in a proper cinema. They've just put a load of seats around with the screen up there, so it's not a very good example of what's going on. And I'd like to know how the big cinemas are coping. I went to the first red carpet event in Leicester Square for 15 months when they put a film on starring my friend Jenny Seagrove, the actress.
Oh, yeah, brilliant actress, of course. American Werewolf in London,
no.
Railway Children.
No, she was actually a woman of substance.
That's
that's a different one.
I was going through her back catalogue.
No, Woman of Substance was a...
You're not that old, mate.
Sorry?
You're not that old.
Oh, I'm not that old at all. But what I'm saying is, I remember going there, and this was, you know, at the Odeon Leicester Square, and we were literally sitting next to each other, and it was absolutely packed and full. And there wasn't a mask in sight. And this was before I'd had my second jab.
Yeah.
Luckily, I've had my second, I've had my booster now. But I still don't feel confident enough to go out in public to go to a football match where you sit next to people. And so I bring it back to one of the tenets of what I've always said. It's personal responsibility. If you feel safe, go. If you don't, don't. But don't start trying to impose how you feel on the rest of society. You've got to take personal responsibility for what you want to do, and I do. I wear a mask on public transport. I cross the road if somebody's coming the other way. I go into shops, I put my mask on. That's what we should all be doing. So I don't like legislation. I don't like being told what to do, but I do like the idea that I can help by being more responsible to myself and other people.
But personal choice is the way, and of course that's what the Swedes have had for a year and a half. They've had a year and a half of sotto voce from their own government, and they've got the lowest cases in Europe. You know, and I think it's very encouraging. You know the British public intimately well. You've written at the Sun newspaper for many years, the Express as well. You know, your job in the newsroom of all of these different papers has been to sort of, you know, gauge public opinion with your finger on the pulse of what people are thinking. Do you think that there'll come a point where this very compliant British public will push back and say no?
No. The thing is, in this country, we are compliant, right? And we go with the flow, so to speak.
We never had a revolution, right?
Never had a revolution, absolutely right. And there's not much kickback. One of the reasons why so many illegal immigrants are coming to this country is because we're the most considerate country in the world.
Soft touch.
Well, you could call it soft touch, but you know, it's something to be proud about, the fact that so many people want to come here because they know that we are the most civilised country in the world, okay? And they're not going to get beaten up in police cells or anything like that. And people say, well, why do they come through France and come to England? Well, there's two reasons. One, we speak English, and B, the French are not as welcoming. But being that civilised and being that considerate has its downturn, doesn't it?
OK, well, yeah, and I think you raise a really good point. Well, look, a massive hour to come. My panel are not going anywhere. We'll talk about a crisis in American capitalism next.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A change in wind direction and a change in weather during the next 24 hours. Mild at first, rain then sinks south. That's associated with a cold front, so colder, brighter weather follows. But the cold front lingering for a time overnight across northern Scotland, bringing some persistent rain here before it finally pushes south across the country through Saturday and Saturday night. And then we open the door to northerlies, much colder but brighter weather following for Sunday itself. Nevertheless, the mild air remains for Friday night. A lot of cloud cover, some breaks in the east, but generally it's cloudy skies and persistent rain there for northern Scotland, pepping up a little bit, I think, during the early hours. A mild night to come once again, perhaps not as mild as it has been, but temperatures still above average for the time of year as we start off the weekend. A lot of cloud in the sky, the cloud thick enough to give some light outbreaks of rain in the west and the south, some hill fog. A wet start though for northern Scotland. That rain then moves through Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland during the late morning, pushing into northern England and North Wales by the afternoon. Mild in the south, colder air follows in the north with some blustery showers, and it's cold enough for some snow over the hills of Scotland in this airflow. But as the, cloud and those outbreaks of rain sink south on Saturday night, that cold air floods south for all of us. And so by the start of Sunday, those temperatures are much lower than they have been during recent mornings. We're looking at a touch of frost for some sheltered spots across the northern half of the UK. But there'll be plenty of brightness in the sky to compensate. Blue skies for many. There will be an area of clouds sinking south into central and southern parts of the UK, and there'll be showers pushing into eastern, northern and some southwestern coasts. But away from those showers, in the sunshine, perfectly pleasant, if a little colder than it has been recently. Plenty of bright weather on Monday, cloudier on Tuesday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Massive last hour of the show, and my big priority on Mark Dolan tonight for the final hour of the show is to have some fun along the way. Yes, big topics, big opinions, but big laughs as well. My panel will return, and we're going to play another Great British Game Show. That's right, a game based around a big news story of the day, and I want you to play along at home as well. But at the top of the hour, in just 2 minutes' time, we're going to the United States, and top US commentator Carol Roth will talk about the crisis of American capitalism and how the pandemic, she says, was used to destroy small businesses. She is not happy about Joe Biden and about what that government is doing to the greatest economy in the world. Plus, reacting to more big stories of the day and looking at tomorrow's front page headlines is my amazing panel. The smartest journalist on Fleet Street, Benedict Spence, sensational author and professional dating expert, Nikki Hodgson, and radio legend himself, Mike Parry. But first up, the news with Karen.
Thank you, Mark. I'm Karen Roberts. These are your latest headlines. Counter-terrorism police have confirmed that the bomb which exploded outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital on Sunday had been packed with ball bearings. They say it could have caused significant injury or death had it exploded in the way the bomber intended. Detectives are examining the possibility that the motion of the taxi stopping suddenly may have caused the improvised device to detonate prematurely. Double child killer Colin Pitchfork has been arrested and recalled to prison just 2 months after his release. It's understood Pitchfork was returned to custody earlier today over a breach of his licence conditions. His re-release will be a matter for the parole board. Pitchfork was jailed for life after raping and strangling 15-year-olds Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth in Leicestershire in 1983 and 1986. US teenager Kyle Rittenhouse has been found not guilty of all charges following a shooting in Wisconsin in a trial which has divided America. Mr. Rittenhouse killed 2 white men and injured another when he opened fire during protests that rocked the town of Kenosha last year. The 18-year-old collapsed in court as he was acquitted of all charges after pleading self-defense in the shootings that became a flashpoint in the nation's debate over guns and vigilantism. The jury came back with its verdict after nearly 3.5 days of deliberation. President Joe Biden has commented on the verdict, saying it will leave many Americans feeling angry and concerned, including himself, but later voiced his confidence in the jury system and urged everyone to express their views peacefully.
I stand by what the jury has concluded. The jury system works and we have to abide by it.
The UK is seeking to ban the group Hamas, designating it a terrorist organisation. The move, if approved by Parliament, would bring British policy in line with the EU and the US. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says Hamas has significant terrorist capability. That includes access to extensive and sophisticated weaponry and terrorist training facilities. Supporters of the Palestinian Islamist group could face up to 10 years in prison. A Hamas official has described the decision as biased towards Israel. COVID booster jabs have been added to the travel pass. Millions of people who've had 3 doses can now prove their status with the NHS app. It means people can visit countries where vaccinations are only valid for a certain amount of time without having to quarantine. Austria will enter a full national lockdown for at least 10 days from Monday. Unvaccinated citizens were told to stay at home last month, but Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg says nationwide restrictions are now needed to try to contain a 4th wave of COVID cases. You're right up to date. Now back to Mark Dolan tonight.
We've saved our best till last. A huge final hour of the show. At the end of the programme, we will have another Great British Game Show. That's right, my team spent all afternoon preparing a daily topical game show here on Mark Dolan Tonight. And this evening, it's a corker, and that's at 11:45. You won't want to miss it, and I want you to play along at home. And in the final hour of the show, I'll always aim to be having some fun. We've got tomorrow's newspaper front pages and my all-star panel. A few emails, they've been coming in thick and fast, mark@gbnews.uk. On vaccine passports, Mark, says Paul, great show as always. Newcastle United don't check vaccine passports, although they claim to do random checks. People are shrugging their shoulders. Think of drunken people not being served in pubs. No one cares within reason. Apathy is the best resistance. Or whatever, man, says Paul. Brilliant email. Thank you, Paul. Adrian says, remember, there will be many people, families, watching GB News who have lost someone with COVID and will still be feeling the hurt when some of your presenters are going against what our medical professionals tell us to do, wearing masks, having vaccinations. Those people didn't have a choice when they couldn't have the jab. Many working for our NHS. They are lost. They had no voices to make. Adrian, thank you so much for balancing the argument on that. Do write again. Dear Mark, Great show and monologue. Of course, that's my Big Opinion slot, which happens at 9 p.m. every night. If you want to see tonight's Big Opinion, it's on Twitter at GBNews. It's about childhood obesity. I've also had some comments to make about Andrew Neil and his departure from GB News, my first comments since he left. You'll find all of that at GB News, 2 Big Opinion slots which are going out and going viral as we speak. But Mary says, when discussing obesity and low-carbohydrate diets, you didn't mention the late, great Robert Atkins. I've read all of his books and followed his low-carbohydrate Atkins diet plans for years, 25 years, in fact. He is, in my view, the expert and original founder of the low-carb lifestyle. By the way, you totally smashed it with your personal opinion on Andrew Neil. Thank goodness he did the right thing and left GB News after 9 shows. The channel has thrived and expanded hugely since his departure. He is not missed. Well, look, Mary, thank you for sharing your thoughts. What I had to say in my Big Opinion piece, We Feel Your Pain, was just my opinion, not the opinion of GB News. But that's the amazing thing about this place. All of our presenters, Michelle, Nigel, you name it, Simon, Kirsty, all of our talent are able to say what they think, and we want to hear what you think too. Mark at gbnews.uk. It's time now for Uncensored, in which we speak to leading commentators all over the world who can speak frankly without fear of being edited, interrupted or cancelled. Tonight, is American capitalism in a state of crisis? Let's speak to Carol Roth, a top US commentator and the author of the best-selling book, The War on Small Business, How the Government Used the Pandemic to Crush the Backbone of America. And hello, Carol. Now, we're just connecting to Carol. There you are, Carol.
Hi,
have you on
it's a pleasure
show.
to be with you
Carol,
this evening.
Tell me why big business and big government have used the pandemic as an opportunity to crush small business.
This is really one of the most underreported stories of the last year and a half. And certainly I looked at this through the lens of the US, but we know that some of the happenings that happened here also happened around the world. We had a government who shut down portions of the economy, not based on data or science, but based on political clout and connections. And as you can imagine, the small businesses are not the ones with the political clout and connections, and they were the ones that bore the brunt of the lockdown from the beginning and then through the duration of really the past year and a half. And what this enabled was the most historic transfer of wealth that we have ever seen from Main Street to Wall Street on 2 levels, both from the direct shutting down of competitors of big business, as well as what central banks, both here in the US and around the world, did to put in money that really benefited the big companies and those who had access to capital. So a tremendous economic moment, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to document it and now to share it with you.
Well, small and medium-sized businesses, SMEs, make up a really big part of the British economy. They make up a big part of the US economy too. And you'll know as well as I do, Carol, and you've written about this in your brilliant books, that it's within small businesses that you'll find the innovation and so much of the economic growth and all of the new ideas. So why is the government not doing more to protect what you call Main Street, these smaller businesses?
So I sort of leave it as a choose your own adventure, but I will offer up this idea that there is a great consolidation going on. Here in the US before COVID, small businesses were more than 30 million entities, and they accounted for about half the GDP and about half the jobs. The other half of the economy is concentrated in about 20,000 big businesses. So if you are a government official who is seeking lobbying dollars or campaign contributions or just a way to consolidate power, is it easier for you to get into bed, so to speak, with 20,000 big businesses or with 30 million very independent businesses that are across every geography and every industry and whatnot? It's certainly sort of a ease of use case. And so what we're seeing, particularly here in the US, is that the government is growing in power and purview they're spending more, and they're creating this sort of unholy triumvirate of big business, big special interest, and big government. And that is crowding out the small business and the opportunity for economic freedom. And as you mentioned, innovation and things that make all of our life better, better products, more choice, competition.
So this is either a conscious or an unconscious conspiracy between the government and big business.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that, you could argue it's, nefarious, or you could argue that they are incompetent, or you could just argue that the government feels like they need to do something and the small businesses are inconvenient. But it doesn't really matter what the intention is. We know that the outcomes end up the same. And every time here in America, they say we're going to do something to help small business or, help the little guy, it never is the case. And that's why we have these big businesses that are always lobbying for more regulation, because we know that regulation is anti-competitive. It makes it more difficult for small businesses to compete. I mean, we saw this after the Great Recession financial crisis. The Dodd-Frank regulation here in the United States that was meant to rein in the big banks actually killed small business banks, and it killed small business lending. So instead of reining them in, it gave them free rein.
So, Carol, if we look at the winners of this pandemic, we can think about Facebook and Google and Apple and Amazon and, yes, Pfizer. Is there a risk that eventually these huge corporations will simply run America?
I think there's a huge risk. And to just wrap some numbers around what you're talking about, during 2020, 7 technology companies gained $3.4 trillion in market value, while hundreds of thousands of small businesses were murdered and millions more struggled to survive. And unfortunately, that's the landscape that we're starting to see. Right now, there's a huge labor supply and demand imbalance here in the US. And it turns out that Amazon is going and hiring all the workers. And of course, they have the access to capital that the small mom and pops don't have. So it's not only that we're going to have fewer choices with this consolidation, but again, it takes those opportunities away from people who want to start a small business, pursue their passion, pursue their freedom, create innovations, to have that route. And certainly that's not a benefit, and it stands in direct opposition to the capitalism and the American dream that America is supposed to stand for.
Now, Carol, finally, how much of this is political? How much of it is about a left-wing president in Joe Biden letting this happen, asleep at the wheel, if you like, sleepy Joe Biden? Could it be that a strong Republican president could shake things up and re-democratize and rebalance the American economy? Is it about politics? Can anyone stop this happening, Carol?
So I think it is a systemic problem here in the U.S. Certainly the Democrats tend to be worse and accelerate the problem. But you have to remember that a lot of these policies came down under President Trump's purview. His administration came up with 15 days to slow the spread. And while Congress was dominated by the Democrats and, helped fuel the spending, it really is sort of a 1-2 punch here. Both parties, the main parties in America, own our, huge trillions of dollars in national debt. And so anytime a Republican comes into the fold, they never really take the opportunity to peel back the government, make it smaller, and to return us to capitalism. So while Democrats certainly accelerate the problem a lot of the time, the Republicans never sort of counter that. And I think here in the U.S., the answer is to sort of break up that duopoly. If you talk about being anti-competitive, having only a 2-party system doesn't give Americans a choice. And certainly neither party right now, even though the lip service on the right is that they stand for economic freedom and fiscal conservatism, unfortunately, we just haven't seen that.
And clearly, if this is a problem for America, which your book points out it is in excruciating and rather troubling detail, well, a problem for America now will certainly be a problem for countries like the UK in the near future. Carol, it's a fascinating book. It's a bestseller. It's winning rave reviews. The book is called The War on Small Business, how the government used the pandemic to crush the backbone of America. I think you've done a great service to all of those small businesses in writing this book. Do come and join us on the show again soon. It's been brilliant to have you. So, still to come. Are you guilty of something called trauma dumping? That's right, we'll discuss how moaning to friends about everyday dramas can be toxic, according to a top professor. So do you reveal all when your friends ask you how you are? Also, is it time to get rid of school uniform? And don't forget, Before Midnight, another great British game show. It's a corker today. Can't wait to play at 11:45. That's right, of course, a game show built around a big news story of the day. So much to come. Your emails next and my panel. See you in 2.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
So I've made my first statement about Andrew Neil's departure from GB News, not the opinion of this channel, but my personal opinion. If you want to have a look at what I had to say, it's on Twitter right now. Go to @GBNews and you'll find that our brilliant social media guru, Carl, has crafted an excellent clip of that. Do check it out. It's time now to react to the big stories of the day and look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. And I've got another front page for you. It's the newspaper. New lockdown in Europe, but no need for UK Plan B yet, say scientists. Rare good news from the boffins, folks. Britain can prevent a repeat of last winter's deadliest COVID wave, scientific advisors believe. More booster doses are needed, though, with under 40s likely to get invites to help their immunity. OK, well, look, we'll get more from the front pages shortly, but let's crack on now with our news agenda in the company of my amazing panel. Writer and commentator Benedict Spence, journalist, author and dating expert Nikki Hodgson, and legend Mike Parry, just generally. School uniforms are always a controversial topic, but one thing most people agree on is that they are extortionately priced. Well, from September 2022, schools in England will be required to help keep uniform costs down by removing unnecessary branded items from their uniform list and selling second-hand uniforms as well. School uniform costs an average of £337 a year for secondary schools and $315 for primaries, according to the Children's Society. And don't forget, a lot of those fleeces and jumpers and ties will get lost after about 3 days of the first term. So is it the right call to make school uniforms cheaper, or should we scrap it altogether? What do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Benedict, I can see you in uniform.
I mean, of a sort.
I can see you in any uniform, actually. Fireman, ambulance worker.
Is this I was wondering, is that the direction you're going to go down?
Do you know what? A possibly hard hat, construction worker, YMCA, that's why it would probably be the best look.
It's just, you're just making a dig at the moustache. That's all this is.
Listen, I'm loving the moustache. It's a silly question, but are you doing Movember?
I am doing Movember.
Well, you're smashing
No, I just thought I'd grow this for a laugh. You're just completely unrelated
I think you're one of the
to
few
this
people...
major phenomenon that's going on.
It suits you, my friend.
I do end up keeping it a little bit longer after November because, why not?
I think
it's warmer during the winter
fits your sort of debonair persona.
The grumpy old man sort of persona, perhaps. But, debonair.
I wouldn't go that. I think you're a grumpy young man, but there you go. So let's talk about uniform. Did you have uniform at school?
Yes, I had uniforms at school. It was one of those schools that was incredibly fastidious about uniforms. And so, of course, being a boys' school, we did everything we possibly could to try to get around the rules, and it just didn't really work because it just wasn't that kind of school. It was just one of those, constant battles with teachers, and you'd end up getting a punishment that was massively, sort of a massive overreaction to having your top button undone. So it was a very, hardline kind of situation on uniform.
My producer, Cal, made a really good point at our meeting beforehand, and he said that actually what's nice about uniforms is that they disguise poverty, or at least they allow children who don't have access to Nike trainers and expensive designer goods to blend in.
I think that's certainly true, although, of course, if the uniform itself already costs as much as an expensive pair of Nike trainers, then you are, the idea of it,
sometimes
poverty is a little bit difficult.
A lot of the uniforms are more expensive than what you get down at Primark.
Yeah, absolutely. This story really resonates with me because I went to a girls' school, which we couldn't afford for me to go to. I got an assisted place to go to it. And before that, many years before, my mum had sat the entrance exam for the school, got in, but couldn't go because her family couldn't afford the uniform.
That's crazy.
And it's just, this actually pulls on my heartstrings, the story, because, this is basically exactly the situation that she was in as a girl.
Yeah.
And her opportunity was robbed because they could not afford the uniform at that time because, things were so expensive back in, the 60s when she was going to school. And I remember, it was quite a big endeavour getting all the uniform and all the bits and bobs from all the, it was very intense getting that uniform. And we also got me the wrong blazer because there was something about the blazer I had belonged to, somebody had sold it to us, and actually it indicated that I'd been to the junior school of the posh private school, which I hadn't been in, and that was a massive social faux pas.
Oh, no.
So uniforms are laden with these social codes and these opportunities to feel less than. So I think anything that levels the playing field has got to be a good thing.
Right, so I think the idea of this policy is for there to be more generic clothes.
Yeah.
So, for example, if they're playing football, they just can wear a white T-shirt and shorts rather than a branded T-shirt that's got the school's badge on it. And I think that's very sensible.
Well, I suppose what you're going to end up with is a kind of tiered system of, well, did your T-shirt come from Asda or Primark or Marks and Spencer's? So there'll be a level of, people looking at the uniforms anyway. But I think that getting rid of that monopoly that school suppliers had has got to be positive because the costs of what they were selling, things that was ridiculous. Yeah.
It's a racket. Michael, school uniform.
Yeah, I think it is a racket in many cases. Well, I went to a school like yours. I went to a direct grant grammar, and like your parents, I could only go because I got a scholarship, because I was a very bright kid. And passed
what
the
went wrong?
exam.
What changed, Mike?
He left himself open.
It kind of dissipated over the years, But no, the point of my story is that we could only buy the school uniform from Browns of Chester. And Browns of Chester was, the store in Chester. Like
market
Debenhams.
store.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, everything was very, very expensive. And you're also right as well. It's not just the blazer and the trousers. What about the PE kit? I actually bought my own First 11 football shirt. I was so proud to play for the First 11, and I used to work in a garage at weekends. So to relieve the pressure on my parents, I bought my green and white striped First 11 football shirt. Yeah, absolutely. I was so proud to have the blazer on it. I think school uniforms are brilliant at giving a child an identity, belonging to an institution, feeling loyalty to something that, they're all bonding with other children about. But the sheer cost is a racket. Now, you mentioned Primark. Why can't Primark come up with an idea to provide school uniforms at 1/4 of the cost of Browns of Chester?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Why can't that be done? And then you can still give the children the recognition that they crave of being part of something like their local school. Why should it always have to go to an upmarket clothier?
You're dead right about that. It is the fact that it's a closed shop, not a clothes shop, a closed
Yeah,
shop.
yeah.
Another point there, Michael, that I would point out is that, I mean, I grew up with uniform, and it means that I'm comfortable in a tie and a blazer.
Yes.
And I'm a little bit worried because I've sort of got, nephews and nieces who go to excellent state schools, but that don't have uniforms. And it just means that they're dressed casually.
I thought all schools had uniforms.
No. Plenty of state schools that don't. And I would argue it's no reflection on their academic achievements. And some of those kids are as bright as you can get.
Yeah.
But I just think that if you spend your entire school years just, tracksuit bottoms and a T-shirt, will you ever wear a suit? Will you feel comfortable in a suit?
It's not just that. Isn't it the sense of the feeling of belonging to something and wanting to throw yourself out into wider society, of being a member of something and representing it? The other great advantage, of course, of the school uniform at my school was there were two schools in my town. One was the King's School Chester for boys. The other one was the Queen's School Chester for girls. And if you got into the sixth form and had a really new smart blue blazer, it was very good for bonding with the girls from the Queen's School Chester. So, no, I mean this as a serious point.
Did you turn a few heads in your blazer, Mike?
Oh, yes, quite a lot. Yeah, quite a lot.
So.
But what I'm
Did you mount the wall? Did you get into enemy territory ever?
I'm not getting into mounting.
Probably the wrong... I think that was the wrong verb, Benedict.
But what I'm saying is it gave you a sense of pride. You felt dignified and, look, I'm something to look at and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm agreeing with your point that it's great to have that sort of...
Gets you in the habit of dressing smartly.
Yes.
I've got to say, having been to a school where everybody was very much supposed to dress smartly, the biggest pastime we had was cutting each other's ties off and ripping the front pockets off. There's nothing more feral than a group of boys who are told you have to dress a certain way, and then they go.
But the one thing I would say actually is I don't actually completely agree with you, Mike, because I don't like that uniformity approach of uniform, because I like the idea that people can be individuals, But we wore suits in the sixth form, and we took great pride in having our special suits and all the rest of it. And I agree with you on that taking pride in oneself has got to be a good thing. But, the reality is it's the demise of formal wear. Formal wear is gone. If you look at, the latest celebrities or the latest artists or whatever, they are not wearing suits. They're wearing very glamorous designer tracksuits and nothing like what we're wearing right now.
And because of the pandemic, a lot of people are not going into offices. My favourite anecdote is my amazing dry cleaner, who I've been seeing for 20 years, not in a biblical sense, although, of course, it would be wonderful, but she's not having it. She used to do 3 loads of sort of business wear in her dry cleaning machine, 3 loads a day, and that would be shirts, ties, blazers, trousers. She does 3 in a week. People just don't have smart wear anymore, and I think it could be the death of the suit, which I think would be a real shame. But do let me know your experience of school uniform. Do you think that we should get rid of it, or do you think, as Nikki has said, it should be rather cheaper than it currently is? Now, users on the social media platform Reddit have produced a fascinating thread on how to outfox a burglar. Homeowners and reformed criminals alike revealed the best ways to put thieves off the scent, and we've compiled some useful tips. Starting off with some hiding places that burglars are wise to. Locked drawers, they'll always check those. The wardrobe. The oven. You can't hide things in the oven, folks. Freezer. And here are some super sneaky hiding places. The washing machine. The fire extinguisher. A tampon box. Or under dirty laundry. Yeah, they won't want to go through your smalls, will they? One burglar also said on Reddit not to bother with safes, as these were the first thing that they would tackle during a break-in. Of course, they go straight for the safe. But is this what it's come to, where burglaries are simply accepted and we're forced to policing ourselves? Isn't that the point, Benedict? That we're the ones now, the cops are so busy chasing people for hate speech.
I was going to say for your Twitter account.
Yeah.
It is... Isn't it rather strange, though, isn't it, that increasingly this is becoming the narrative? That the Conservative Party, who've been in power for the best part of a decade now, supposedly the one that's tough on crime, have very much seemed to have abandoned crime and law and order, which was supposed to be sort of the cornerstone of the state. And increasingly, the attitude, I think, of the general public is that the police will not necessarily come and help you, and it's not actually in the interests of central government to try to tackle this. And I do think it sort of represents a very interesting sort of shift, because this isn't sort of rabid right-wing sort of policy. This is everyday stuff. This is ordinary people. This is the sort of thing that they think is very important.
It's more important than sleaze.
Much more important than sleaze. And you can't actually run a society that is completely distrustful of its own police, not in terms of policing speech or anything like that, but that you don't believe that they will come to your aid when it comes to matters of basic crime like theft, like protecting your property. You can't run a society like that.
A crisis in public confidence in our public services. So, for example, we pay our taxes for the NHS. I know it's been a really tough 2 years, of course, but people can't get a face-to-face GP appointment. Their house gets burgled. The cops don't even bother to turn up or investigate. There are so many crimes, you know, sexual assaults on women that are appallingly underreported. I mean, you do worry, don't you, about a sort of post-pandemic crime wave and a collapse in public confidence in public service.
Well, I'd wondered if that was happening already. I think it's interesting that, you know, the Tories have been in power for so long and they don't know really what to say on policing, because if they admit that people do need help, then that's their fault, obviously, because they've been in power for so long. And then if they don't, they're not really serving the communities. I mean, I've got to say, every time I've had to call the police about something, they've been exceptionally quick and exceptionally good. So I don't have any personal experiences of the police not turning up in a catastrophe. But, you know, I don't know about this burglary tips thing, because, I mean, isn't this kind of opening people... I mean, doesn't this sound a bit like what burglars would do on a Reddit thread if they wanted to find out where your hidey holes were?
Well, I was wondering why it was that this was going to be broadcast on national TV.
That's what I was
all of these
I mean, I can't
here.
tell you where I put all my secret stuff in my house, because that would just be ridiculous. But isn't it kind of opening everybody up, saying, oh, and I put it here and I put it there, and everyone goes, oh, dive into that address, find out where the iPhone is posting that comment from, and we'll go and clean up.
The message from the authorities is that if you get burgled, it's your fault. You know, you've got to hide your stuff better. Michael, people are being told now by local constabularies not to wear a Rolex when they're out and about. What's the point in having a luxury watch if you can't show it off?
I totally agree. And I agree with Nikki here, very much so. I got carjacked, right, because I went home one night late after a job, and two young kids on a motor scooter that they'd stolen an hour earlier followed me into my underground car park before the door came down, and they tried to take my car, you know, and luckily...
Terrifying.
Fought them off. Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying, honestly. But, you know, I kind of fought them off and all that and shouted to help and all that, and they fled. Rang the police, and the cops were there within about, I would say, 10 minutes. And they were concerned, and my glasses had been knocked off, and they were smashed and all that kind of stuff, and they were very attentive. However, within 36 hours, I got a letter from the local police station saying they would not be pursuing the matter any further because they couldn't find any evidence to work upon, you know?
Yeah.
So the police officers themselves still want to do the business, but the system within which they work... Because, do you know, a lot of people now within the police force are not police officers. They are employees of some security company that sit in police stations and analyse a crime and say that's not worth following and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I think we've got. But I agree with you. I was frightened to tell anybody that I've got Wayne Rooney's First England shirt signed and framed on the wall in my house in case somebody tries to break in and steal it.
Yeah,
again, on national TV. No, but I think it's a very good point. You're going to struggle to find a Bobby that ever joined the police not to commit crimes, aren't you? So, that's, you know, we can take pot shots at
the police. Well, they don't know where I live, Nicky, that's all.
Too right. Oh, my goodness. Well, look, the emails are coming in already on so many issues. School uniforms. Peter says school uniforms were used in my town so the police knew which school to turn up at. I'm sure there's a degree of truth in that one. John says, due to COVID and the school not wanting pupils to change at school, during most of this year, on PE days at the school where my 13-year-old daughter goes, she was allowed to wear her PE kit all day, and that was great. Smart and comfy to use PE kit all day, and one less cost because we have to pay for both PE and non-PE outfits. John, a great point, and I think you're so right about the needless cost of some aspects of school uniform. Now, sometimes in this industry, the best news, the biggest news stories is right on your doorstep. Because I caught Colin Brazier, the jewel in the crown of GB News, one of the finest journalists to grace these aisles, of course, a former foreign and war correspondent and now the king of news anchors here at GB News. Well, I caught him in the GB News kitchen, chowing down on some coleslaw straight from the tub. That's right, this esteemed broadcaster, like a scavenger, like a wastrel, hoovering up his M&S, at least it was M&S, because it is Colin Brazier. But we all have our quirks when it comes to dining habits. Let me walk you through some of mine. Cal took some pictures of me earlier. This is me enjoying butter just straight from the block. Absolutely delicious. Occasionally, I grind a bit of salt onto the butter and just eat it neat. What a delicious
Very
drink.
nice, yeah.
What else has Cal got? This is me eating almond butter. Again, no accoutrements required, just a fork and Meridian almond butter. I go for the crunchy variety because that's how I roll. And how about this? Anchovies straight out of the tin in olive oil. Pretty good for your omega-3s. Not my best look, I'll be honest. And then this is the final one. Now, I've got to say, my team think that it's dog food. It looks like pedigree chum.
It does, yeah.
But let me tell you, it's I believe it's Sainsbury's chunks of meat in gravy, and it's outstanding. So thank you, Sainsbury's, for that. So there you go. I've got some pretty awful food habits, I'm not going to lie. Those are all things that I enjoy eating.
I don't think that's
Colin is one of my heroes, but I've got to say, I had to kind of recalibrate my view of him after the coleslaw moment. But do any of you have any odd eating habits, Michael?
Well, I haven't got odd eating habits unless other people think they're odd. But I love...
Oh, here we go.
I love kippers, OK? But I wouldn't dream of cooking kippers in a pan in my kitchen in the mornings because, of course, it emanates terrible odours. But what I do is I buy kippers in the tin, in sunflower oil, and you just pull the ring back, and then you put your kippers on your plate and get some fresh bread and eat them. I love kippers, but people mock me for it. They say, how can you get kippers out of a tin?
Yeah.
I said, because you can, because they're on the shelf at Morrison's. You know,
Do you get a bit whiffy? Do you find yourself being followed by cats or anything?
No, not at all. Not at all. Kippers are absolutely nutritious and lovely. The other thing I like, we're back on the fish scheme, is the fish trail. I like a whole packet of fish fingers at once built into a fish finger pyramid.
All right, tell me more. So you essentially, a bit like a pyramid scheme. How many fish fingers would be at the bottom of the pile?
5.
All right, and then it goes to 4, 3, 2, 1?
Well, if it's a packet of 10, I have to start with 4, 3, 2, 1.
Right.
But if it's a packet of 12, I can start with 5, 4, 2, 1. Do you see what I mean?
Why in a pyramid? I mean, why not just have them on the plate?
Well, it's better if you can push your fork through 2 or 3 fish fingers because I cook them extremely lightly.
Right.
You know what I mean? I like them crisp.
By the way, do you grill or fry them?
I put them in the oven.
Oh, you bake them?
And warm them up so that they don't get crispy on the outside. A lot of people I know don't eat them properly. They put them in a pan and they put some, like, deep fry, sunflower oil, something like that. And they come out all crispy. I can't eat them like that. I like to eat them
No, I
as soft
agree.
as
Do
possible.
you remember when they used to be really fatty and hard from school dinners? Did you ever have really bad fish fingers at school?
Yes.
So you do this, because you do enjoy a bit of volume. You're known for ordering 2 fish and chips, aren't you, in a restaurant, is that right? You've been known to double for that?
Well, I don't order 2 fish and chips. What I say is, I want fish and chips, so I want 2 pieces of fish, please. But they have to charge you for 2 full meals because that's the way it's served. So I give the chips away to somebody else, you know, who looks less prosperous than me.
You're almost like the new Jesus, aren't you?
Yeah, well, not sure I'm
You must be.
He's eating the fish, he's not giving fish away.
Oh, yeah, that's the problem. That's not very Christian.
Yeah. Before I
do you offer your chips to like fellow diners, or how does it work?
I just tell the waitress to take them away and give them to somebody else, you know, or some kids, you know, if there's a family with 3 or 4 children or something like that.
Do you ever get a little round of applause when you leave the restaurant? All these families that you've fed?
No, because I never reveal my generosity. I don't like to. One thing I used to do before, unfortunately, I got diabetes too, and this is probably why I did, I could easily buy a plastic container of Cornish ice cream in Tesco's, go home and eat the lot whilst watching a half-hour episode of Coronation Street without a shadow of a doubt. Easy. Easy. It's so Moorish, isn't it? Cornish ice cream, you know? Particularly if it was strawberry, chocolate and vanilla in the same tub. Beautiful.
Yeah. Was that the Neapolitan? Is that what that was?
I think it is.
Yeah, I tell you. Well, look, you're a picture of health now. I know you've lost weight, so congratulations.
Yes,
you're getting in shape, which ties back to what we were discussing earlier about getting everyone in the country back into shape.
Indeed.
And especially kids. So any odd... clock's against us, but any odd... I mean, you've seen mine.
It's going to sound really middle class. I got into this when I was at university. It was great hangover food. You take a piece of brie, like a triangle of brie.
Yeah.
Nice. Slice it.
Yeah.
You take some guacamole or some taramasalata and you just use that and you just...
Oh, I'm loving that.
That's your hungover food.
So it's a kind of cheese spoon.
Yeah. That's the differ.
That's high quality. I've got to say, and I've not had this for a long time, but dipping chips into mayonnaise, which is, I think, a Belgian idea.
Yeah, it's lovely.
It's evil but delicious.
No, it's fabulous. I love it.
It's got to be done. Well, look, I'm going out for dinner soon with Mike Parry. He can order 2 fishes. I'll have his chips.
Absolutely.
What a date, by the way. Coming up, the Great British Game Show is back. That's right, we play a game every night based around a news story of the day. Tonight, we're going to play The Benchmark, inspired by the Benches of Redditch calendar. That's right, it's a calendar, it's out, and it celebrates a different bench in Britain every month. You couldn't make it up, so we'll see you just after the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A change in wind direction and a change in weather during the next 24 hours. Mild at first, rain then sinks south. That's associated with a cold front, so colder, brighter weather follows. But the cold front lingering for a time overnight across northern Scotland, bringing some persistent rain here before it finally pushes south across the country through Saturday and Saturday night. And then we open the door to northerlies, much colder but brighter weather following for Sunday itself. Nevertheless, the mild air remains for Friday night. A lot of cloud cover, some breaks in the east, but generally it's cloudy skies and persistent rain there for northern Scotland, pepping up a little bit, I think, during the early hours. A mild night to come once again, perhaps not as mild as it has been, but temperatures still above average for the time of year as we start off the weekend. A lot of cloud in the sky, the cloud thick enough to give some light outbreaks of rain in the west and the south, some hill fog. A wet start though for northern Scotland. That rain then moves through Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland during the late morning, pushing into northern England and North Wales by the afternoon. Mild in the south, colder air follows in the north with some blustery showers, and it's cold enough for some snow over the hills of Scotland in this airflow. But as the, cloud and those outbreaks of rain sink south on Saturday night, that cold air floods south for all of us. And so by the start of Sunday, those temperatures are much lower than they have been during recent mornings. We're looking at a touch of frost for some sheltered spots across the northern half of the UK. But there'll be plenty of brightness in the sky to compensate. Blue skies for many. There will be an area of clouds sinking south into central and southern parts of the UK, and there'll be showers pushing into eastern, northern and some southwestern coasts. But away from those showers, in the sunshine, perfectly pleasant, if a little colder than it has been recently. Plenty of bright weather on Monday, cloudier on Tuesday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Peter says, Mark, criminals cannot steal from your house if they can't get in. That's the best advice you will ever get. He also goes on to say, fish finger butties are very hard to beat, but they must have lots of salt, vinegar and butter. Peter, now you're talking.
Yeah, totally agree.
Lots more to get through before the end of the show. That's right, just 15 minutes. But let's get to some more stories. With me still, my amazing panel, Benedict Spence, Nikki Hodgson and Mike Parry. Now, do you pride yourself on being your friend's shoulder to cry on? Or are you guilty of oversharing even your smallest issues? Well, a problem shared certainly is a problem halved, but don't overdo it because you could be at risk of trauma dumping. That's right, trauma dumping. There's a phrase there for people who feel the need to offload even their smallest problems and frustrations onto others. And apparently, the modern trend of people oversharing their problems can be toxic. Psychologist and Oxford University Associate Fellow Nalisha Wick-Remarsinger says oversharing is encouraged on social media these days, but people unable to properly process their own emotions end up piling their trauma onto friends and family. Nalisha said the lines between what to share with a friend and what should be kept to themselves or discussed with a professional are being blurred. What do you think, Nikki? Do we overshare these days?
Oh gosh, I think we do. And I'm a firm believer in therapy, in talking about your feelings, and getting stuff out, and just using talking as a means of feeling better. But there is a limit to what you should be telling other people. I think what people who overshare in that kind of trauma dumping sense don't realise is that being on the other side of it, listening to someone for 10, 15, 20 minutes offload onto you makes you stressed. You go into their problems, you feel like you need to fix things for them, you feel the weight of the world with them, when actually what you could both be doing is talking about something more cheerful. I'm not saying don't talk about things that are terrible, but if you work towards focusing on the more positive stuff together, you'll actually enjoy your friendship more as well. And you'll have your bond better. But because you don't never want to be that friend when someone, we've all got that person when someone says, oh, I really like them, but they just do go on a bit about all the stuff that's wrong in their life. Please, anyone who's watching, tell me if I'm that person. Email Mark and let me know. I really don't want to be that person.
You're definitely not that person. You bring
I live in fear of that.
You bring only good news, Nikki Hodgson. Mike Parry, do you remember the good old days when you asked someone how they are and they lied?
Not really, no. I totally agree with what Nikki said, but I'll take it a stage further. I never, ever share my problems with anybody else, particularly my family. I've got sisters who have busy lives themselves, they have families to bring up and all that. Do I really want to go to them and say, I've had a terrible day, I'm feeling a bit depressed and all that? They start worrying about me. I don't want them to worry about me. I don't want them to know. But at the same time, I'm reluctant to take other people's problems on because actually, there's not a lot you can do about it. Apart from the only way I've ever been able to help people is give them money. I know that sounds odd. No, I'm serious. Somebody comes to me, I've got a terrible situation. All right, don't worry, I'll try and help you with that. Somebody came to me once and said that their oven cleaning business was going down the Swanee and they're very depressed about it. And so I gave this person £5,000. And they just ran off with it, and they told me they're going to buy a new van for the van cleaning, the oven cleaning business, but it didn't. But that's the only way.
Did you not get anything out of it, like a pair of oven mitts?
Nothing. I got nothing out of it at all. You see, that's
the satisfaction of helping someone.
No,
he stopped complaining.
And he stopped complaining.
No, it's the coward's way out. Absolutely. I thought, you've got a problem with your oven cleaning business. I tell you what, I can solve that immediately.
But Michael,
you're on your way, good sir.
I know you're a really generous guy, but do you not think that actually your family are there for you? They love you to bits, and they want you to enjoy good mental health.
No.
And the whole point is that when you talk about your problems, you feel better already just having told someone, even if they don't offer a tangible solution.
I agree with everything you've said, but I am not prepared to offload my problems onto members of my family for them to start worrying about it. I have to... I honestly, I know this sounds all macho and all that, but I believe it's my problem, I've got to solve it. You can't really solve other people's problems.
Michael, are you an old-school bloke? Is it a guy thing?
I don't know if it is or not. And
are you being a proud man, like James Bond or something?
No, no, I promise you...
Stiff upper lip?
No, it's not like my father. My father was in the Second World War. He was on the D-Day landings. He saw things and went through things that none of the modern generation will. He never talked about them. Now, that's what you're talking about. People who were prisoners in Japanese war camps and all that kind of stuff, they never talked about it. It was too horrible to burden their families with and all that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying stiff upper lip. What I'm saying is, I'm not going to I'm not going to load onto my family my problems because they won't be able to sort them out anyway. So why should I burden them with that as well as everything else they've got in life, And similarly, when people come to me and I think, look, I'd really like to help, but I'm not sure how I can. And so I kind of give out this message that I don't think I can help, you know what I mean?
Benedict,
So I'd like to.
I hear what Mike's saying. I try to listen to people because I would say anyone that's going through a tough time, I do think that talking about it does help. What is it, a problem aired is a problem halved or something like that? But what my problem is what I call repeat offenders. And I've had friends in the past who will call me and there's some unbelievable drama with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It's the end of the world. And then 3 weeks later, there's a new drama with a new boyfriend, new girlfriend. And then after a year, 2 years of that, you're like, wait a minute, it's just always drama with you. Now, is that unkind?
I think Mike's got a point that stoicism is underrated these days. I think it's very interesting that somebody's come out and said, well, we're sharing too much, because all we've been told to do for the last decade or so is, come on, share a little bit more, because you're bottling it up inside and it's killing you slowly. But, I think it's as much to do with actually the attitude of the person that's sharing. If they've got a lot going on and it's not very good, but they want to find a solution to it, actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with unloading on people because we are social animals and we need to help each other. But it does need to have that attitude towards it. There needs to be a sort of a sense of, OK, well, I'm going to dump on you now, but please, can we try to make some progress out of this? There is one other thing, and that's that in the Catholic Church, we've got these things called priests. And you can just take all your problems to them. They have to listen.
That's very it is lovely. It is lovely. Well, look, we're gonna crack on. But it's clearly when Benedict's going through a difficult time, he grows a moustache. So we've all got our little
coping mechanism.
Coping mechanism, exactly. What a mechanism, by the way. So look, apologies, by the way, if you tuned in just when Benedict was saying, look, I'm going to dump on you. But I'd like to get to our next story now. The man, the myth. It's all about context, folks. The man, the myth. The legend, that's right. Kevin Beresford is back making the headlines with his latest work of art, Benches of Redditch. You may have heard of him for creating such masterpieces as Car Parks of Britain and The Wonderful World of Jack Grealish's Calves. But he's been producing niche calendars for years and has cornered the market in the mundane and the peculiar. He told The Guardian that he made his first calendar, The Roundabouts of Redditch, in 2003, to try to drum up interest in the town. At the time, we had 3 prisons and no cinema, so we didn't have much going for us, he said. He also told The Guardian, I made a roadkill calendar one year, but no one wanted to buy that. Can't imagine why. Well, Kevin Beresford, you've inspired us. Yes, indeed. The team have come up with a fantastic game today. It's another great British game show, and we're going to play The Benchmark. Great work, Liam. We've compiled some famous seats and benches from major movies. Can you guess the movies? So there you go. So we have famous beaches and benches from films. What's this first one? Let's take a look. OK, do we recognise that?
Yeah. It's the, what's the name? You don't know what's in a box of chocolates until you look on the cover. What's his name?
Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
Well done. That's right. That is the bench from Forrest Gump. And there's Tom Hanks in that Oscar-winning film. What an absolute classic it is. OK, next up, let's have a look at our next bench. Right. Where is this from? Which particular bench is this? It could be from a movie, a TV show.
Isn't that the current Everton bench?
Nicely done.
No,
you realise?
No, it's not that full.
destroyed Mike Parry's mental health there. He'll be on the phone to his sister.
Come on, trauma dump, Mike.
Oh no!
Okay.
What's happened to the Blues? The Toffees?
Yeah, Rafa, help me.
Okay, well, any guesses? I can tell you that this is the March bench from Benches of Redditch. It's actually one of the Redditch. That is March
that
in
is
this
a trick
calendar.
question.
I highly
should recognise that because I lived in Redditch for 18 months when I was a reporter on the Birmingham Evening Mail.
Oh,
Sitting on all the benches, waiting for the next
I know
story.
all the benches. I recognised some of them when I saw the calendar.
Yeah, that's inside information.
I'm serious, yeah. Some of those benches and me had some quite intimate moments.
Yeah.
Many a fish and chip consumed on a bench.
Fishes and
chips. I'll tell you something, yeah. I'm sure you've been horizontal on them more than once.
Well, I can't get into that, of course.
No, of course, exactly. You always protect your sources, right?
I certainly do, yes.
How about this? We've got 3 more. Let's squeeze them in. This particular seat is from which movie?
Hang on,
or is it a calendar? We've indulged Nikki in some poetic license.
Austin Powers.
Benches, seats and chairs.
Okay.
Groovy baby.
Yeah, Austin Powers, yeah.
Yeah, it's not Austin Powers, it's Men in Black. Another retro classic. There you go, an absolute classic as well. Great fun. OK, how about this one? What is this? Seat number 4.
That's the Starship Enterprise.
Well done. It's Captain Kirk's chair in Star Trek. Well done, Michael. Legendary William Shatner. And last but not least, seat number 5. It's a throne more than a chair, isn't it?
It's not... what's the TV series? Thrones. What's it called?
Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones.
No, good guess. It's I can tell you that it's an insight into the world of drugs. The cocaine business. Scarface, Al Pacino, of course, that's the chair in Scarface, which I'm sure is drenched in blood at some point of the movie. Well, look, that's brilliant. I really want to thank my amazing panel tonight for your company and your input and your oversharing. Didn't feel toxic at all. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
We're going to go backstage and next week, Mark.
Well, that's the plan. Also, many thanks to all of you for your company tonight, for your emails, your tweets and your Facebook messages. Honestly, lots of love for Colin Brazier. A couple of people have asked for a signed copy of that photograph of the amazing Colin eating his coleslaw at the GB News kitchen. Well, I've got to say, it's obviously doing the job because his show is so brilliant and he returns at 8 o'clock on Monday, always unmissable TV. I'm really excited. I'm back tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow and Sunday night, 9 p.m. till midnight. We've got my big opinion from 9, some fabulous guests, my panel, and don't forget Mark Meets as well. 2 big showbiz names. Tomorrow night, Martin Roberts. Sunday, TV legend Sue Cook. See you tomorrow at 9.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hey, welcome along. This is